The cultivators looked at Yi Futian and Shi Qiyao. Now, the two of them were basically in sync. Was the West Imperial Palace planning to lay its hands on the cultivation resources that Yi Futian possessed? They actually did not hesitate to allow Shi Qiyao to join the Heavenly Mandate Academy to cultivate and seduce Yi Futian. With the peerless elegance of Goddess Qiyao, even Yi Futian would have difficulty resisting her charms. They might even become a couple. Would the members of the West Imperial Palace be willing to marry off their future top figure? Was Yi Futian worthy of them doing so? If they set aside their statuses, the two of them were quite a match. Both of them were peerless figures. It was just that Yi Futian's origins were not very clear. Now, everyone was speculating over it. However, Shi Qiyao was the true descendant of a great emperor. She was the descendant of the West Emperor and the strongest person to awaken to the power of his bloodline. She was the first to do so in 1,000 years. With such status and exceptional talent, even as the college chief of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, Yi Futian was far from worthy of her hand. From the looks of it, Ren Huangyi is looking down on the other forces of the Divine Prefecture, someone said in a provocative tone. The person continued, You allied yourself with the Lost Clan and allowed Goddess Qiyao of the West Imperial Palace to join the Heavenly Mandate Academy to cultivate. However, you seem unwilling to do the same with the other forces of the Divine Prefecture. It appears that Ren Huangyi has not let go of the incident with the Lost Clan. Why do you say so? I have said that as long as you are willing, the Heavenly Mandate Academy will ally with the various forces of the Divine Prefecture and exchange cultivation resources, replied Yi Futian in a casual tone. He was not angered. He naturally understood that the members of the Divine Prefecture were intentionally provoking him and wanted to stir up conflict. All right, our Infinite Mountains is willing to offer up cultivation resources for exchange and form an alliance with the Heavenly Mandate Academy, a cultivator said. He was from the strongest force of the boundless domain, Infinite Mountains. They had inherited the teachings of an ancient, great emperor figure. Now they had taken the initiative to ally with the Heavenly Mandate Academy. The cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy frowned. They were doubtful of the sincerity of the other party. Would the cultivators from the boundless domain really be willing to share their top cultivation resources with them? The cultivators from the boundless domain most likely intended to share some cultivation techniques perfunctorily in exchange for the cultivation resources in the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Ren Huangqin took a step forward and replied, Of course, there's no problem. However, I need to first examine what kind of resources you are willing to share. Based on that, the Heavenly Mandate Academy will decide what level of cultivation resources we will exchange. It would not be easy for the other party to ally with the Heavenly Mandate Academy. If the other party only coveted their cultivation resources, they would not agree to their request. From the looks of it, the Heavenly Mandate Academy still does not trust the forces from the Divine Prefecture. The so-called alliance is only lip service. In reality, you have no intention of joining forces with us, snorted the cultivator from Infinite Mountains. He added, Looks like the West Imperial Palace is more capable in persuasion. What do you mean by that? Questioned a cultivator from the West Imperial Palace coldly. He gave the cultivator from Infinite Mountains a displeased glance. The latter paid no heed to it and merely smiled. A youth then emerged from the group of cultivators from Infinite Mountains. The youth was surrounded by the divine halo of the Great Path. The brilliant glory which surrounded him seemed to be a natural glimmer, and not something he intentionally unleashed. It was as though he was born with a divine body and was destined to be exceptional. With a glance, the cultivators from the West Imperial Palace recognized the youth. He was the most talented figure among this generation of cultivators from Infinite Mountains. He was the divine child of Infinite Mountains, and similarly the heir of a great emperor. He was powerful and was crowned Boundless Divine Child. Boundless Divine Child stepped forward as he looked at Yi Futian and Shi Qiyao. He said, I have long heard of the fame of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Since Goddess Chiao is willing to enter the Heavenly Mandate Academy to cultivate, I also want to cultivate in the academy for a period of time. Will Renhuang ye allow my sudden request? Boundless divine child continued. Of course, I only ask Renhuang yi to treat all of us equally. I am not interested in the cultivation resources of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. As soon as he said this, another person emerged from the crowd and said, I also want to cultivate in the Heavenly Mandate Academy for a period of time. Will Renhuang yi allow it? This person was the divine child of the Vajra region. Golden light circled around his entire body. He appeared to have a golden divine body. It looked extremely powerful. Then, one by one, others expressed their intentions of joining the Heavenly Mandate Academy to cultivate. This caused the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy to reveal strange looks. The Heavenly Mandate Academy was not some holy land. They might be considered the #1 cultivation ground in the original realm, but these people were from the ancient god clan. Did they need to do so? Clearly, they had no intention of joining the Heavenly Mandate Academy for real. For them, the only value that the Heavenly Mandate Academy offered was the starry cultivation court as well as the teachings inherited from the great emperors that Yi Futian mastered. Or perhaps these forces from the divine prefecture only wanted to pressure the Heavenly Mandate Academy and force Yi Futian to yield. They wanted the Heavenly Mandate Academy to compromise and share all their cultivation resources with all. Otherwise, why would they lower their statuses to cultivate in the Heavenly Mandate Academy? Deep down, these cultivators from the ancient god clan most likely looked down upon the Heavenly Mandate Academy, which was a local force of the original realm. Moreover, during their battle with the Lost Clan, Yi Futian offended quite a few factions of the ancient god clan. After all, Yi Futian once collaborated with the ancient god clan to break through the battle matrix of the rocks. These factions assumed that Yi Futian did not give his best during the battle, leading to their failure to break through the matrix. Otherwise, they would have entered into the secret zone of the Lost Clan then. Yi Futian himself forged an alliance with the Lost Clan and had access to their cultivation resources. He then attracted Goddess Chiao from the West Imperial Palace to join him to cultivate in the Heavenly Mandate Academy. In the future, Yi Futian might draw the rest of the forces in the West Sea domain to form an alliance with him. His academy would further expand its influence. This caused the ancient god clan from the divine prefecture to be irritated. Moreover, they were also interested in unveiling the secrets behind Yi Futian's identity. Hence, they were intentionally suppressing Yi Futian now. Yi Futian saw various figures standing in different locations in the sky. Each and every one of them were outstanding cultivators. The cultivator from the Haotian clan was among them too. Yi Futian even spotted Hua Junlai in the crowd. Judging from their auras and the divine light of the great path which surrounded their bodies, they had no intention of forging an alliance with him. They were clearly here to force him and the Heavenly Mandate Academy to yield to their demands. The other forces of the divine prefecture stood further behind. They did not declare their stance. However, they most likely wanted a slice of the pie and were waiting for Yi Futian to compromise. Shi Qiyao gazed up at the silhouettes in the sky. Each one of these figures were extraordinary. There were 8th tier and 9th tier Renhuangs. Many of them were renowned figures in their respective domain in the 18 domains of the divine prefecture. Now they were all standing in the sky and pressuring Yi Futian. They claimed to want to form an alliance, but they were pressuring him to yield in reality. However, this was unrelated to her. Although she said she wanted to join the Heavenly Mandate Academy to cultivate, that did not mean that she would join Yi Futian in going against the various forces of the divine prefecture. She wanted to see how Yi Futian would resolve his situation. That day, in the region of the Lost Clan, it was Princess Donghuang descending upon the region that had resolved the crisis faced by the Lost Clan and allowed Yi Futian to escape his predicament. However, the forces of the divine prefecture clearly were not willing to let him go. Now they had descended upon the Heavenly Mandate Academy simultaneously. The alliance between Yi Futian and the Lost Clan had clearly made the various forces upset. Chapter 2362 The Siege. Currently, if Yi Futian were to agree to their demand, then all the forces from the Divine Prefecture would swarm in and enter Heavenly Mandate Academy to cultivate. At that time, how could he maintain control of the situation? The capability of Heavenly Mandate Academy was limited, and there was still something left to be desired when comparing to these top forces from Divine Prefecture. In the case of the Ancient God Clan in particular, the chasm between the two was even greater. Today's occurrence was nothing more than these cultivators trying to bully their way into the Heavenly Mandate Academy in a bid to take over the cultivation resources controlled by Yi Futian. Yi Futian's eyes swept toward those cultivators as an invisible, oppressive coercion crept in every direction. The entire Heavenly Mandate City was under that majestic and awesome pressure. The Heavenly Mandate Academy was just one of the many principalities in the original realm. You are all from the top clans in Divine Prefecture, so there was no need for you to cultivate in Heavenly Mandate Academy. I'm afraid you praised the Heavenly Mandate Academy too much, said Yi Futian as he looked at these people. As the head of many clans, Emperor Yi is in charge of the inheritances of several great emperors, as well as being in charge of the Starry Cultivation Court. These are all places worthy of our cultivation, someone retorted, and did not disguise the greed they had for the cultivation resources at Yi Futian's disposal. Their purpose was to intimidate Yi Futian. Today it was not up to him to decide whether he would give in or not. The Heavenly Mandate Academy is a small place. I'm afraid we can't accommodate all of you, Yi Futian responded. Yi Futian's voice was indifferent. Immediately, the atmosphere froze and felt even more tense. This was Yi Futian directly refusing to receive them. So, Emperor Yi is ignoring our request, someone piped up. Emperor Yi claims that Original Realm is a part of Divine Prefecture and that everything was working towards an alliance within Divine Prefecture. But it seemed to us that you don't really consider yourselves as a part of us. You think that the Heavenly Mandate Academy and the land of the Original Realm are an entity unto themselves. Voices continued to filter in, blaming Yi Futian for some imagined transgressions and other made-up charges. They made it sound as if Yi Futian was the one who broke up the unity of Divine Prefecture and was resistant to share cultivation resources. In their mind, he was too selfish, and it was an indication that he had no sense of belonging to the land of Divine Prefecture. Emperor Yi also possesses the inheritances of several great emperors. I would like to see what kind of cultivation level was able to impress Goddess Qiao so much, someone else said. It was none other than the descendant of Yuanshi the Great from Yuanshi Domain, the heir of Yuanshi Palace. His aura was astounding, and he stood out above everyone else. I would also like to see for myself the talents of Emperor Yi. The speaker was a top figure from the Boundless Domain. It was the Boundless Divine Child himself. He was surrounded by the divine light of the Great Path and was radiant beyond words. Emperor Yi controlled the divine body of Xinjiao, the Great Emperor, and comprehended an extraordinary body of the Great Path. I cultivated the Vajra divine body, and I would like to experience the might of Emperor Ye's divine body firsthand. The divine child of Vajra region also joined in. The power of the Vajra divine body was superb and domineering. It had passed down through the great emperor, who was also of the ancient god clan. After that, other voices continued to speak. Even those who didn't speak had taken a step forward. Their bodies were radiant and bright, surrounded by divine light, and it was obvious that they all wanted to confront Yi Futian. For a time, the divine light of the Great Path was extremely brilliant as it sprinkled down upon Yi Futian. All those auras were truly terrifying, and the cultivators that were here to challenge Yi Futian were at least at the level of Hua Junlai. These heirs of the ancient god clan wanted to have their own exchanges with Yi Futian. But this could also be seen as Yi Futian being recognized by these top forces from the divine prefecture. He had defeated the Devil Emperor's disciple as well as Hua Junlai and the descendant of the Haotian clan. He had impressed Goddess Qiao so much that she was now willing to enter the Heavenly Mandate Academy to cultivate. This kind of strength needed no further embellishment. Therefore, it was no surprise that these genius talents wanted to test the power of this reputed king of the Heavenly Mandate. Moreover, they wanted to see what secrets Yi Futian might be harboring, and if he was hiding anything. Everyone in the Heavenly Mandate Academy looked quite somber. They raised their heads to look at the figures. Every one of them was an extraordinary talent, and this assembly was even more awe-striking than the one previously presented at the battle with the Lost Clan. Among them, there was even Ren Huang of the Ninth Realm. Never mind Yi Futian himself. Just in Heavenly Mandate Academy alone, and amongst its allies, they were hard-pressed to find some top enchanting figures of this caliber who could contend with these outsiders. Clearly, this was a bit too much. These cultivators were ganging up on Yi Futian at the same time. Yi Futian raised his head and glanced at the cultivators who were in the void. He had a sharp look about him. His clothing now fluttered by itself, and his silver hair danced in the air. Then they saw his body moved as he swayed upward, heading straight into the sky. Everyone was stunned. Yi Futian made a move alone and headed towards the challengers by himself. Could it be that he wanted to take on these cultivators by himself? Shi Qiao also showed a look of concern. She had personally experienced Yi Futian's strength and knew he was incredibly strong. Although the two of them had stopped, Shi Qiao knew very well that it was difficult enough for her to defeat Yi Futian even when she was one realm higher than him. In the scenario of a sustained battle, the outcome was unpredictable. But even so, did he know what kind of challengers was he facing? Shi Qiao also knew of these people. Even if she hadn't seen them before, she had heard of their names and knew who they were. These characters were the top figures who were well known in their respective domains. They enjoyed a reputation of their own. No matter how powerful Yi Futian was, he couldn't face so many top enchanting existences all at once. These people deliberately pressed Yi Futian, forcing him to fight so that they could examine his combat effectiveness. At the same time, they wanted to have the opportunity to uncover Yi Futian's secrets. If Yi Futian were to fight them, it was only a matter of time before he had to use all the tricks in his bag and expose all of his abilities in front of everyone. Those in the Heavenly Mandate Academy were a little puzzled when they saw this. Those cultivators were some top-notch geniuses. No matter how strong Futian was, it would not be easy to contend with all of them. At this moment, in the distance, a group of mighty and powerful cultivators came in a hurry. This group was made of people with extraordinary abilities and strengths. The man in the lead was Sikong Nan, indicating that reinforcements from the Lost Clan had arrived. The cultivators from various principalities of divine prefecture looked at them without too much concern, though. This here was not Shinny Continent, and the Lost Clan, without the support of the super matrix of Shinny Continent, was unlikely to pose any serious threat against these various powers of the divine prefecture. They were curious to see what the use of Yi Futian's alliance with the cultivator of the Lost Clan was. "Futian," Sikongnin called out. Yi Futian looked at the cultivators from the Lost Clan in the distance and nodded slightly at them, indicating that they need not take action. He floated high in the sky. As he surveyed the cultivators surrounding him, those people also returned his gaze. The divine light on their bodies was even more radiant and dazzling. It was as if they were the descendants of the gods. "Do you want to come up one by one, or do you want to attack all together?" Yi Futian asked. All the cultivators who were present were famous figures in the domains of the divine prefecture. Naturally, they would not deign to rush in altogether against Yi Futian. They came to pressure him, but they didn't want to really kill him. If Yi Futian were killed today, it would not be easy to explain it away to Princess Donghuang. Not to mention, there was a mysterious cultivator behind Yi Futian, the teacher from Four Corner Village. The divine light that shone upon these surrounding cultivators glistened with even more brilliance. They looked at one another as if to see who would make the first move. Above the sky, Yi Futian was standing tall, surrounded by all these cultivators who were challenging him. Under the crowning of the divine light, it was obvious that anyone who was here was someone with a commanding presence in the divine prefecture. At this moment, a voice came out as a man took a step forward. The man was brilliant all over while releasing a golden divine glory. His upper body was draped in a golden half-shirt the same color as his skin, which seemed to be golden as well. This was the divine child from the Vajra region, whose strength was tremendous. The Vajra region was one of the principalities within the ancient god clan, housed inside the Vajra domain of the 18 domains in Divine Prefecture. The method of cultivation in the Vajra region was wild and aggressive, impenetrable and invincible. The cultivators' physical bodies were tempered to the extreme to cast the Vajra divine body, also known as the Vajra indestructible form, impervious to any great path. Any existence of the same level, even if allowed to attack at will, could not manage to shatter this particular physical form. In the Vajra domain, the Vajra region was a world unto itself. It was a world carved by the gods in the days of yore. It was said that the great path rule that was inside of it was somewhat different from those on the outside world. Those born into the Vajra region were said to be extraordinary, baptized by the divine power of the Vajra region during their growth. Only those who could awaken the power of the Vajra region were qualified to become an official member. Those who could not would only exist in the margins of the Vajra region, not considered one of its cultivators in any real sense. The same went for the many principalities within the ancient god clan, most of which were not at its core. Since there were not many cultivators for this reason, even the domain chief's manner of the Vajra region had to be especially courteous to the cultivators in the region. The status of these cultivators was not necessarily lower than that of the domain chief's manner, and most of them were far above it. At this moment, the divine child of the Vajra region looked at Yi Futian. He put his hands together and bowed, slightly without speaking. However, the divine light of the great path bloomed, and an incredibly sharp aura expanded from him. The instant his arms moved, an extremely strong and sharp will suddenly manifested in the space, shrouded by golden divine light. Although he had not made his move yet, the sense of threat was clearly palpable. The divine light on the divine child was shining so magnificently and brilliantly with indescribable radiance. He raised his hand and pointed towards Yi Futian across the space. In an instant, the power of this gesture penetrated heaven and the earth, leaving an arc of light in the void that zoomed in on Yi Futian with intent to kill. Buzz. The divine light was exceptionally bright, cutting through the space with absolute dominance. It was as if the power of this one finger was even more terrifying than any divine swords, that it was capable of penetrating everything and get in front of Yi Futian. Everyone was observing this attack closely. Vajra region's divine power was second to none, the likes of which were difficult to find even among the ancient god clan. They were all curious as to how Yi Futian would counter it. Yi Futian felt the threat from his opponent as soon as the man acted. Yi Futian's entire body was full of brilliance, and a terrible light was released from the divine body. There was a roaring boom of the great path as his body turned into the way with incomparable dominance. Infinite, sword-shaped characters appeared, surrounding his divine body. Likewise, Yi Futian raised his hand and pointed. In an instant, there seemed to be infinite sword will that resonated between heaven and earth. Numerous sword-shaped characters gathered upon Yi Futian's finger and came down with the motion of his finger. As his hand dropped, the sword manifested between his fingers, and at this moment his divine body of the great path was a body of sword. Two forces of the two fingers converged and collided in the void. That Vajra finger kept moving forward, destroying all sword will along the way. But upon Yi Futian's body, endless divine swords gathered together, as if they had turned into a river of swords. The Vajra finger navigated through the river as a terrifying divine glory erupted from it. However, it could not get closer to Yi Futian and pulverized under the infinite sword will. What an aggressive attack! Below, cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy shuddered. He was, indeed, the divine child of the Vajra region. As expected, none of these people were ordinary. They couldn't help but worried for Yi Futian. After all, this was never meant to be a fair battle. With all these cultivators laying siege on him, how was Yi Futian supposed to fight that? The Vajra region's divine child didn't stop there. His hands clasped together, and suddenly an infinite golden divine glory bloomed from his body, which turned into a godlike phantom. He looked straight at Yi Futian, uttered a sound while his palms faced forward. Suddenly, a gigantic and boundless giant palm blasted forward. At the same time, above the void, countless giant palms of Vajra manifested. They sheltered the heaven as well as this corner of the sky, intending on burying Yi Futian right here, right now. Yi Futian focused his attention there as his mind turned. Immediately, he was surrounded by stars, which transformed this area into a starry sky world. Many of the stars seemed to merge into one as their brilliance became interwoven and revolved around Yi Futian. Accompanied by loud rumbling sounds, countless giant palms of Vajra blasted him with unspeakable belligerence. These giant palms madly expanded until they could crush these stars, causing them to explode. Nonetheless, they still could not break down the starry defense in this starry domain. The body of the divine child floated in the air as his Vajra battle form was becoming even more massive. In an instant, endless golden divine glory blanketed the world, as if the entire world was taken over by the Vajra region. Above the firmament, endless giant palms of Vajra slammed down, covering this corner of the sky, including the starry domain. Boom! At this moment, the many stars that surrounded Yi Futian began to explode frantically, as if the sky and earth were on the verge of being split wide open. The whole scene was beyond horrifying. Those frightening palms continued to strike down and swept toward Yi Futian, who was surrounded by the stars. The divine power of Vajra region is truly deserving of its reputation, verily one of the most domineering powers in the world. Some other cultivator from the ancient god clan whispered. As they were watching the battlefield, they were in no real hurry to join in the action. If Yi Futian were able to quell Shichiyao, it would not be easy for the Vajra region's divine child to take him. An even more radiant starlight was released from Yi Futian's body, and the surrounding stars suddenly got brighter. The light seemed to have transformed into something tangible. With Yi Futian's body roughly as the center, an absolute field now formed. Inside this area, a starry shield appeared, protecting Yi Futian. Boom, boom, boom. The terrifying giant palms of Vajra blasted down, smashing on the light screen, but was unable to destroy it. The starry light screen was clear as crystal and completely transparent. The divine glory on Yi Futian seemed to melt into the light screen as if it was part of his great path, divine body. This kind of large-scale offensive method, aggressive though it may be, was simply unable to break through. Those who were watching exclaimed inwardly. As expected, someone that even Shichiyao could not take down would not be so easily defeated. Just the defensive power of this starry shield alone was astounding. Vajra region's divine child did not take any other actions before someone else stepped out. The man was the heir of Yuanshire Palace from the ancient god clan in Yuanshire domain. He glanced there before pointed his right hand toward the sky. Suddenly a formation appeared in the heavens, as terrible swords chiming and reverberating between heaven and earth. Infinite divine swords were gathered within the formation, unleashing astonishing sword will. Each sword contained God-punishing power, which was enough to destroy all existence. Despicable. Cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy looked on coldly, and some of them commented audibly. While the Vajra region's divine child was still attacking, someone else had stepped in to attack Yi Futian as well. It is comical that the cultivators of the divine prefecture's ancient god clan had to join forces to fight against someone with a lower realm of cultivation. Fungi said sarcastically. However, the cultivator in the void responded, "Don't worry, it's just a test, and we won't hurt him. We just wanted to see the level of ability Emperor Yi has achieved." As soon as the voice trailed off, the formation divine sword came down from the firmament, much like the power generated by the god-punishing swordsmanship. It aimed to destroy as it impacted the starry shield. What he did not say was that while they would spare Yi Futian's life, they would press him to his utmost limit, forcing him to reveal all of his abilities and methods. They wanted to see if there was anything hidden by the original realm's number 1 genius talent. When the falling swords fell on the shield, fine fractures appeared on the surface of the shield, with more and more fractures appearing, and the giant palms of Vajra continued blasting down as well. Those fine fractures now turned into considerable cracks. The divine punishment sword matrix of Yuanshi Palace is indeed horrific, and this is just a small sword matrix. The surrounding cultivators were not only observing Yi Futian's combat effectiveness, but they were also observing the strengths of those from the ancient god clan. Though they were aware of each other's existence before, many of them had never met, much less making any exchange with one another. Now, they could see the level of strengths possessed by these cultivators. Of course, they may not use all their methods all at once. They would be wise to keep some of their abilities to themselves. Bang! With continuous loud booms, the starry shield shattered. The terrifying god punishment sword and the overbearing giant palms of Vajra continued blasting down, chasing after Yi Futian. Those in the Heavenly Mandate Academy were secretly worried when they witnessed this shocking battle scene. The opponents that Yi Futian was facing now were all excellent peak figures. Chapter 2364 1 against 2. Many attacks descended upon Yi Futian. The crowd saw that his body was on the brink of being drowned out by the incoming attacks, but he didn't move an inch. He was seemingly unfazed by the frenzy of attacks. A dazzling spatial halo shone on top of his divine body of the great path. Runes emerged and formed doors of space with his body as the center. They surrounded his body, causing him to be enveloped within them. Rumble. The god-punishing swords charged downwards to annihilate Yi Futian. Unfortunately, when they approached him, they entered into the doors of space directly. It was as though the swords disappeared into nothingness. However, they caused the doors of space to tremble violently. More savage attacks descended on Yi Futian. The giant palms of Vajra charged towards him at the same time as the swords. However, with Yi Futian's body as the center, the doors of space shone even more brightly and transformed into an independent region. It was the miniature world. Fungi and Old Ma were somewhat emotional when they saw the scene. The miniature world was a divine spatial technique. Yi Futian was actually able to utilize it to such an extent. From the looks of it, Yi Futian had fully mastered all 7 great divine techniques of the Four-Corner Village. He had learned all their cruxes and was able to use them skillfully. The user of the miniature world could form an independent world from his surroundings. The miniature world could block off all attacks and ensure that the cultivator was free from all disturbances of the outside world. When cultivated to the highest level, the cultivator could form a miniature world around him and was completely isolated from the outside world. However, no cultivation technique was perfect. There was no such thing as an invincible divine technique. All techniques were either reinforced or restricted by other techniques. The might of a technique depended on its user. Even though the miniature world was powerful, it was not an almighty technique that could completely ignore all other attacks. As the god-punishing swords and the gigantic palms blasted on the miniature world consecutively, the doors of space also shook violently. Gradually, the doors of space were destroyed and disintegrated. Even so, they managed to block off most of the attacks. The collective attacks of the two cultivators were unable to break through Yi Futian's defense. This scene caused Vajra Divine Child and the cultivators from Yuanshi Palace to reveal astonished expressions. Yi Futian had indeed cultivated many different techniques. Each and every one of them was extraordinary. He had most likely learned this particular technique from the Four-Corner Village. As expected, both the Ziwei segmentum and the Four-Corner Village contained exceptional cultivation techniques. With the addition of the teachings of the great emperors, Yi Futian was considered a walking treasure trove. As long as they could bring him under their control, they would have the chance to loot these treasures. Divine light radiated brightly on Yi Futian's body. He shot up high into the sky. His pupils glistened with golden divine halos as he swept a glance at the two cultivators beneath him. Another domain of the great path appeared around him. The sun and the moon appeared simultaneously as the stars circled him. The entire world changed as divine phenomena occurred all around him. Right now, Yi Futian seemed to be no longer suppressing his own power. His aura of the great path enveloped the vast space. This part of the world seemed to become his own domain. The stars that circled around him and the sun, moon, and yin-yang diagram high in the sky emanated a powerful aura. Buzz. The divine light of yin and yang rained down. It also contained powerful swords of catastrophe that collided with the god-punishing swords. They actually were no weaker than them. Although Yi Futian's cultivation plane was a level lower, he mastered the power of yin and yang. Even against this god-punishing power, he could still hold his own. At the same time, starry stone tablets appeared. Countless runes and ancient characters were contained within them. The might of the tablets pressed down on the space and headed towards Vajra Divine Child. Countless divine tablets, carved with ancient runes, suppressed the space and clashed with the giant palms of Vajra. At the same time, a terrifying rumbling could be heard in the sky. Vajra Divine Child felt a powerful suppressive aura of the great path emanating from the sky and spreading towards him. He looked up and saw a slit appear on the horizon. In the sky above, a door from ancient times seemed to appear. It suppressed everything around it. At a glance, he seemed to be enclosed within this space. The door's suppressive power was astonishing. It was the gate of world suppression. Down below, Emperor, she glanced at the Millet Emperor beside him. The Millet Emperor had a look of relief in his eyes. Back in the day, the disciple he was most proud of was Zongchan. However, Zongchan had perished, being killed by Ninghua. Now, although Yi Futian could not be considered his disciple, he had inherited Millet Emperor's teachings. Yi Futian managed to unleash the power of the Gate of World Suppression to such an extent. He had far surpassed Zongchan in his heyday. If Zongchan witnessed this scene, he would most likely be pleased too. The facial expression of Vajra Divine Child turned serious. The Gate of World Suppression was a divine technique Yi Futian obtained through meditating in the Wangshan Watchtower. It was very powerful. Yi Futian modified the Gate of World Suppression based on his own understanding and cultivation style, making it more suitable. It could suppress a part of the sky. Similar to his other attacks, the Gate of World Suppression was a domineering power. Vajra Divine Child put his palms together. 10,000 zhang, golden divine halos, burst forth. The majestic Vajra battle form glowed with even more frightening golden divine light, and its halos shone for 10,000 miles. Dang! With a loud clang, the gigantic battle form, akin to a god, raised his arm and sent out a palm strike. This endlessly big palm was engraved with countless Vajra runes. It was indestructible. It was the art of supreme attack of the Vajra region, the Vajra divine seal. In the sky above, the Vajra divine seal and the gate of world suppression collided. The sound of the collision echoed throughout the space. The Vajra divine seal radiated with brilliant halos as the entire palm shone brightly. It intended to eradicate everything that crossed its path. The gate of world suppression vanquished all attacks which it encountered. Both powers were extremely domineering. Rumble, an alarming sound thundered. The Vajra divine seal was shattered. The gate of world suppression followed suit and disintegrated. A terrifying storm swept out and covered the entire space. All the cultivators who had yet to unleash their powers did so now to block off the residue waves from the aftermath. "He is so strong!" exclaimed the cultivators who were standing below. They were impressed by the domineering attack. Their gazes all landed on the white-haired silhouette high in the sky above. The hearts of the cultivators from the divine prefecture all quivered violently. He actually was holding his own against two top-tier cultivators. Monstrous existences from the Vajra region and the Yuanshi domain were attacking him at the same time, and yet they still could not suppress him. He was fighting against the two of them alone, and his attack power was actually not weaker than that of the two powerful cultivators combined. Around them, many top figures were spectating the battle. Their hearts also stirred. The heavenly mandate realm ruler, the top monstrous figure of the original realm, indeed had exceptional talent. He was peerless. Even in the entire divine prefecture, few people could compare to him. Shi Qiao was smiling. Before this, she had sparred with Futian, so she knew clearly that wanting to take him down would not be so easy. During her battle with him, if she hadn't admitted defeat at the very last moment, the outcome of their battle would still be unknown. This was the result, even with her going all out. How could these people possibly force Futian to show his trump card easily? Unless a ninth-tier Renhuang shamelessly attacked him, these prominent figures would not be able to investigate Futian's true ability without bringing out their strongest attacks. Chapter 2365. Something was off. There were also slight changes in the expressions of Vajra Divine Child, as well as the air of the Yuanshi Palace. They seemed to have become slightly more serious. All the cultivators were watching this battle. They were the successors of the ancient god clan's two major factions. Yet they actually could not take down Futian. The white-haired youth was attacking both of them at the same time alone. He was overwhelming them. It was as though the two of them acted as foils for Futian. Thinking about this, their eyes burned even brighter. Vajra Divine Child put his hands together, and immediately rumbling sounds could be heard all around them. The divine sound of the great path seemed to circle them. Golden halos filled the space, dyeing this part of the sky golden. Buzz! Vajra Divine Child's figure leaped high up into the sky. His figure stood below the golden sky. He had a solemn expression as he put his hands together. After the golden divine light dyed the sky, the crowd saw a face appear. It seemed to be the face of the ancient god of the Vajra region. Endless golden halos rained down and enveloped the space. It was the Vajra Dominion. When the cultivators of the divine prefecture in the distance saw this scene, their hearts trembled. From the looks of it, Vajra Divine Child was getting serious. He had actually unleashed the Vajra Dominion. The Vajra region ancient god clan was a force in the Vajra domain. They were established by an ancient great emperor. Currently, the cultivation grounds of the Vajra region were part of an independent world. The Vajra Dominion was passed down from the great emperor. It was a super powerful technique. Within the Vajra Dominion, everything would be bound. Anyone who wanted to escape had to shatter the Dominion first. It was extremely difficult to do so. Under the Vajra Dominion effects, the Vajra region's divine power could be unleashed to its most powerful state. Its might was overwhelming and without equal. Now, Vajra Divine Child was clearly unleashing his true ability, going all out against Futian. In another direction, another cultivator was still around. the heir of the Yuanshi palace, stared at the battlefield. The appearance of the Vajra dominion somewhat affected him. However, since Vajra Divine Child had unleashed his strongest teachings, then the heir of the Yuanshi palace would temporarily assume the support role and not unleash his mega battle matrix. He would first unleash a smaller matrix. After he considered this, the heir of the Yuanshi domain pointed a finger upwards. Immediately, streaks of divine light radiated in the sky. Ripples formed in different locations. They were similar to water ripples and propagated outwards. Soon a pattern was formed from one of the ripples. Similar scenes occurred at different locations in the sky. More and more patterns took form, and Sword will whizzed in the heavens and the earth. Sword will covered a vast space of 1,000 miles. The different patterns all ended up forming the same diagram. It was the God-punishing sword matrix. Each and every diagram was a God-punishing sword matrix. At a glance, there were 99 God-punishing sword matrices hanging in the sky. The power which loomed over the space was enough to destroy this part of the sky. It was menacing. The heir of the Yuanshi palace pointed his finger at Yi Futian. All 99 God-punishing sword matrices also pointed towards Yi Futian. Instantly, Yi Futian felt as though his spiritual soul had been locked in place. It was as though he had nowhere to run. No matter where he went, only one outcome awaited him: annihilation by the God-punishing swords. "This is still not the final form of the God-punishing sword matrix," commented someone from a top force of the Divine Prefecture. This God-punishing sword matrix had yet to reach its final form. If it was in its final form, it was similar to the battle form unleashed by Vajra Divine Child. The entire matrix would block out the sun and envelop the vast space. It would transform into a domain of the Great Path. When the God-punishing swords descended, all living beings would face their doom. Yi Futian glanced at the sky above. Both cultivators had coalesced frightening powers and unleashed the art of supreme attacks. They were ready to kill him. However, even so, his facial expression remained calm and did not show many changes. He took a glance at the two cultivators. A formless aura was unleashed from his body and slowly permeated into the surrounding air. An independent region formed with his body as its center. In this region, the sun and the moon shone brightly at the same time. Stars flowed freely and obeyed their own rules. The region functioned with a different law compared to the outside world. Dazzling halos burst forth from his body and resonated with heaven and earth. Shi Qiyao looked towards where Yi Futian was. She faintly sensed something. During her battle with Yi Futian, he unleashed some power at the very last minute. She was not able to clearly sense what it was that time. Yi Futian's current state was similar to that during their previous battle. Her gaze was dead fixed on him. She was curious whether or not the cultivators from the Vajra region and the Yuanshi palace could defeat Yi Futian. The rhythm of the great path circled them. The ancient god of the Vajra region, which loomed over the sky, moved. Instantly, brilliant divine light radiated. The next moment, the heavens and the earth shook as though the sky was collapsing. Endless Vajra divine seals charged downward with an imposing momentum. At this moment, it was as though the sky was about to be crushed into pieces. Endless Vajra divine seals blasted towards Yi Futian simultaneously. This scene was spectacular. All the cultivators who were witnessing the battle on the sidelines felt their hearts tremble in fear. The sky was shaking violently as though it was on the verge of crumbling. The endless Vajra divine seals were capable of annihilating all existences. Who could stand against them? In an instant, the Vajra divine seals crashed down towards where Yi Futian was. They directly plummeted towards his figure. The space where Yi Futian stood appeared to immediately shatter, including Yi Futian's figure within it. Rumble. A terrifying scene appeared where Yi Futian was. Countless Vajra divine seals crashed down and drowned out this part of the sky. It seemed as though they could not be blocked at all. However, Yi Futian merely glanced at them. His gaze was steady. The next moment, the Vajra divine seals that rumbled intensely as they came crashing towards him suddenly slowed down. The speed of such an attack was incredibly fast. It would have killed Yi Futian before he could think. However, right then, the various cultivators could clearly sense that the falling Vajra divine seals were slowing down. It seemed as though some power of the Great Path was slowing them down. Moonlight shone down and enveloped the space. It brought with it an extreme chill. It was as though the space was frozen solid. There was also the power of space acting on this area. Within this area, the laws of the Great Path seemed to be different than that of the outside world. In here, Yi Futian was in absolute control. Even when such an overwhelmingly powerful attack entered into this domain of the Great Path, the effect of the power in the domain on it was much greater than that of the outside world. Buzz. Divine light rained down and encapsulated the Vajra divine seals. The divine seals were coated in a layer of cold frost. Even so, the frightening Vajra divine seals still descended upon Yi Futian with terrifying rumbling sounds, intending to crush him. Just then, the stars that were orbiting nonstop in the sky immediately collided with these Vajra divine seals. The stars shattered the seals in one great sweep. These Vajra divine seals did not seem as powerful as people imagine them to be as they shattered. "What is going on?" exclaimed some cultivators. They were stunned as they gazed at the scene in astonishment. Something was off. "It's the boundary wheel," a top-level cultivator from the ancient god clan exclaimed. They looked at Yi Futian and his surroundings and saw that invisible current had turned into a boundary wheel. Yes, it is indeed the boundary wheel. The Vajra dominion of the Vajra divine child is also considered boundary wheel. But there are some differences. His boundary wheel is centered on his body and spread outward, almost invisible. However, the domain of that boundary wheel is self-contained, like a world that was his domain, someone explained. The boundary wheel overlapped with the Great Path domain, and in that sense the boundary could be defined as a domain. The Vajra divine child could very well overpower any space with his divine wheel and turn it into the face of Vajra region's ancient god. In this Vajra dominion, the Great Path power derived from the Vajra region would be unimaginably powerful, and he could exert his might to the fullest extent. His attacking method was fierce and invincible. If it were before, perhaps even Yi Futian would have some difficulty resisting those endless attacks that came from the sky. Infinite Vajra divine seals each contain the power to annihilate a world. With endless divine seals blasting down at the same time, their potency was almost apocalyptic. But at this moment, just when these attacks creeping toward Yi Futian and entered into the field around him, they slowed down unexpectedly, and their power seemed to weaken as well. They were first frozen by ice, then pulverized soon after. It was reasonable to believe that they must have entered within the domain of Yi Futian's boundary wheel. Lying therein was Yi Futian's world. The Great Path that he controlled was more than powerful, so much so that it could affect and weaken the Vajra divine seals considerably, thereby destroying them. Generally speaking, a boundary wheel will not have such power unless his boundary wheel is different from the others, some cultivator who had been through the divine tribulation of the Great Path said in a low voice. He was following the development in that area closely. Well, similar to levels of suppression, Yi Futian's divine wheel of the Great Path might be of a higher level than that of the divine child, thus achieving the Great Path suppression. Therefore, even at a lower realm, he was able to block, even destroy the powerful attacks from his opponent with ease, someone else commented, analyzing Yi Futian's ability and making sense of what they were seeing. At this moment, these top cultivators were even more interested in Yi Futian. As a matter of fact, Yi Futian was harboring some secrets. That was why everything about him was so different from the others. What kind of existence was the Vajra divine child? He was the heir of the Vajra region, possessing the divine power of all of the Vajra region. His offensive attacks were extremely overbearing and rarely find another who is worthy to compete with him. However, for such an existence to be suppressed by Yi Futian on the level of their boundary wheels, the reasoning behind this amazing phenomenon was provocative enough. This was something of which Shi Qiyao had become keenly aware. She recalled the curious feeling that she felt at the last moment of her fighting with Yi Futian. In truth, it was exactly as they had said. She was facing the same situation that the Vajra divine child currently was. At the time, she used the eyes of the West Emperor to create a great path domain and thought it was enough to suppress and crush Yi Futian outright. But she was unable to do so. At the very last moment, a strange sensation manifested, which was probably due to the reason these top figures had concluded. Yi Futian controlled the unique divine wheels of the Great Path, possibly with much higher levels of capabilities for him to suppress the divine wheels of the Vajra divine child in this fashion. Under this kind of condition, even though the realm of the Vajra divine child was higher than Yi Futian, his offensive attacks failed to touch Yi Futian. Moreover, those endless Vajra divine seals had disintegrated instead. The cultivators from West Imperial Palace stole a glance at Shi Qiyao. This goddess of West Imperial Palace must have gotten some hints of it in the previous battle, which would explain her willingness to cultivate at the Heavenly Mandate Academy. In the battlefield, the divine child of the Vajra region looked really bad when he saw what was happening. Those golden eyes pierced through the space and fell on Yi Futian. His attacks were blocked so readily that countless divine seals now shattered and disintegrated, unable to pose any threat to Yi Futian at all. In the meantime, on the other side, the heir of Yuanshi Palace was equally disturbed at this sight. Was Yi Futian as strong as this? He was aching to see whether his attacks could upend Yi Futian. With a wave of the hand, rays of sword lights shot out from the god-punishing sword matrix in the sky above. Countless sword lights came down at the same time as if intending to annihilate the space, and that everything would then be broken and destroyed. All would turn to nothing under the swords. Even the area of the Great Path would be no exception. Pst! A sharp and piercing sound was heard as god-punishing swords came down, entering the area of the Great Path that surrounded Yi Futian. In the next moment, those destructive swords suddenly decreased in speed and were covered with layers of frost. Even though the swords were still continuing their downward momentum, shredding the power of the Great Path as they went, aiming directly at Yi Futian, they were very much affected. Yi Futian waved his hand, and the divine light of the sun and the moon spilt, carrying the destructive shadow/solar divine sword. It aimed straight toward the downward moving, god-punishing swords, and as they collided, the invading swords were obliterated. Sure enough, the god-punishing swords of Yuanshi Palace suffered the same fate as the Vajra divine seals. As soon as any of them invaded into the dominion around Yi Futian, its effect was affected and began to weaken. In that dominion, Yi Futian's power of the Great Path seemed to increase, easily blocking their aggressive attacks. This also meant that an attack at this level couldn't even get close to Yi Futian, let alone defeat him. Around them, those top cultivators from Divine Prefecture, who had surrounded the battlefield, looked on, their bodies dazzled with divine light, filling this space with their fighting will. They seemed eager to jump in, to see for themselves just how strong Yi Futian's dominion was, and what level of power could he withstand. No matter how powerful any dominion was, it was highly unlikely to be totally indestructible. As long as the offensive power was great enough, they thought, even the entire dominion could be destroyed just the same. "Want to give it a try?" said someone whose eyes never deviated from the battlefield. His interest was piqued. This method must be what Yi Futian was ultimately relying on. This level of ability would be hard to undermine even by top figures in the Eighth Realm. At this moment, these two major cultivators could not defeat Yi Futian, not even close. "Let's wait," someone else replied, choosing to continue observing rather than take action. The Vajra divine child and the heir of Yuanshire Palace had not been pushed to their limits yet. At present, everyone else was a little curious as to how this battle would end. At this moment, the Vajra divine child put his hands together. An immense divine light shot out from his body, which then merged into the divine phantom that hovered above the firmament. There seemed to be horrific divine sounds that lingered between heaven and earth. Immediately after, horrific divine light appeared. This golden divine light possessed terrifying penetrating power, which now honed in on Yi Futian. In the next moment, a massive and boundless arm appeared above the sky. This arm covered the sky and the sun, like a stone pillar that came from the sky, heading towards Yi Futian, who was on the ground below. The arm went forward, and a frightening giant palm of Tianqian slammed out. A terrifying booming roared in the space, seemed to signify the impending collapse of this world. Even the entire void was trembling now. Witnessing what had just taken place, everyone knew that this Vajra region's divine child was now determined to win, and he wanted to break down Yi Futian's dominion to defeat him. Chapter 2367. Ninth Realm joining in. The arm came down all the way, penetrating directly into the great path domain around Yi Futian. Propelled by the Vajra divine power, it seemed that even the force of this great path domain was having difficulty affecting this Tianqian arm. Shocking sounds of rumbling were heard, and the space was on the verge of shattering and collapsing. The stars within the great path domain were exploding, destroyed under the giant palm of Tianqian at the other end of that massive arm. The other end of the golden arm that had penetrated the void was directly connected to a golden body above the firmament as the Vajra divine power continuously poured into it. When the arm slammed down, to those in the distance, it was as if a golden light beam had punctured the void from the firmament downward with unstoppable force. Boom! A vast, radiant divine light erupted from Yi Futian. The divine light swept out with his body as the source, obscuring the sky and the sun. Terrifying divine light wrapped up on that Tianqian arm, so the mobility and power of that arm were greatly affected. Even though it was still attacking towards the ground below, it was slowing down considerably. Behind Yi Futian, a series of exceptionally beautiful visions now appeared. Accompanied by a long trilling whistle, Yi Futian seemed to have morphed into the peacock demon god. His visage was now becoming even more wicked and scary, and an astonishing demonic energy rushed out from him. As hearts were beating violently, a majestic demonic power burst out as infinite divine light bloomed. Buzz! When the massive arm blasted down, it was blocked by the starry shield. The divine light of the stars that surrounded Yi Futian intertwined and formed an absolute, superb defense around him. The arm blasted right on the shield, which caused it to shake violently, but the downward momentum of that Tianqian arm was also stymied. There was a loud bang, and cracks began to appear on the starry shield. It then shattered as the shield collapsed. The infinite Vajra divine power above the firmament was constantly pouring in until it finally broke down the shield. However, at the same time, the golden giant palm was shrouded by the supreme power of the shadow as well, with much of its power now diminished. Above the firmament, the golden divine glory continued to fall, pouring into the arm to restore its power. However, at this time Yi Futian, who was within the starry light screen, was shining brightly all over, as if he had turned into an indestructible divine sword. The sword was surrounding his body, just as numerous starlight showered upon him, as well as the power of the demon god that was also covering his body. Under the support of multiple powers, Yi Futian's aura was rising frantically at this moment. Buzz! Countless divine lights shot out toward that massive arm at the same time. They converged into a single beam that unified and turned into a sword. This sword strike pierced through the void and heaven and earth, hitting the giant palm of Tianqian in an instant. At the moment when the two attacks connected and collided, time and space seemed to have stopped. Soon after, countless rays of light shot into the giant palm as golden light diffused and filled the sky. The giant handprint started to crack as Swordwell rushed into it frantically, invading Tianqi's arm through these cracks, intending to perforate it through and through. Sizzle! A frightening Swordwell followed that golden arm and creeping upward. Everyone saw that Tianqi's arm split open. At the same time, a shocking sword light burst from the split arm, rushing high into the sky, and blasted directly at that divine figure above the firmament. Boom! Boom! The Tianqi's arm now pulverized and exploded with madness, and the arm crumbled. Vajra Dominion shook crazily in the void under that monstrous sword might, and it was leaving the Vajra divine child a little pale. Yi Futian raised his head to take a look. Then a beam of light rushed into the sky. It was his body now that traveled as a sword. All the crowd saw was a sword light penetrating the void, directly blasting on the divine figure above. There was a crystalline, crunching sound that was clearly audible. Everyone saw a sword that traversed heaven and earth. Some fractures appeared on that Tianqi's phantom in the void, as the Vajra Dominion was totally shaken up. On the battlefield, Yi Futian didn't seem to have moved a single inch. He was still standing where he was, as if it had not been him who had made the attack just now. However, Yi Futian's entire body dazzled. His physical body was the sword body of the Great Path, surrounded by endless starlight. With a turning of his mind, everyone saw yet another sword rushed into the sky with impeccable swordsmanship. The distance of space was non-existent. The body was the sword. Boom! Another sword blasted upon the Vajra Dominion, and then the third strike, the fourth. In a short period of time, it seemed that countless sword strikes had pierced through heaven and earth, and all of them slammed on the Vajra Dominion. That dominion, which contained indestructible divine power of the Vajra region, began to show more and more fissures. The impact of what was taking place in front of them was indescribably shocking. Countless swords seemed to be connected from sky to earth, hitting every location of the Vajra Dominion. If this continued, the great path domain of the Vajra region would inevitably collapse. In that case, the divine wheel of the Vajra divine child would probably be broken. Many cultivators looked in the direction of the divine child and saw that golden face was revealing hints of struggle as if he was in some pain. Finally, accompanied by a muffled groan, with a turning of his thoughts, the infinite divine light disappeared in an instant, and the Vajra Dominion vanished as well. That endless divine light submerged into his body like mad, and he dared not continue. The Vajra divine child has been defeated. Everyone thought as they witnessed the incredible scene that had just taken place in front of them. Under the joint efforts of these two major cultivators, the Vajra divine child was suppressed and had to withdraw his great path domain, which clearly suggested that he could no longer bear Yi Futian's attack. If he were to insist on continuing the battle, even his divine will might collapse and shatter. Yi Futian looked towards the direction of the Vajra divine child, but did not continue his attack. In another direction, the heir of Yuanshi Palace did not continue his attack either. The offensive and defensive techniques of the Vajra region were known to be incredibly fierce and overpowering, but even the Vajra Dominion was now broken up. Even if he were to continue, it would be unlikely for him to defeat Yi Futian. This number one genius talent in the original realm was mighty indeed. The other cultivators in the vicinity focused on Yi Futian. It seemed that Yi Futian could not be suppressed until they take some action. The Dominion force released just now by Yi Futian was considerable, and they still didn't know if it had even close to Yi Futian's limit. Not bad, someone praised. A top figure from Divine Prefecture looked at Yi Futian and asked. The reputation of the number one genius in original realm was well deserved. Emperor Yi has infinite potential, and I can see that the dominion of Emperor Ye's cultivation is truly extraordinary. I wonder how this divine wheel of the Great Path was cast. Yi Futian looked at the person who spoke and saw he was also a powerful existence from the ancient god clan, a supreme cultivator from infinite mountains. He was a top Renhuang who cultivated at the infinite mountains. Moreover, he was of the ninth realm. The aura that was being released by him was elusive yet terrifying. This great path domain was cast by his natal spirit. He wouldn't be so crazy as to divulge that. So he did not bother to respond. Those cultivators were still hanging around the surrounding space. Since they had come with bad intentions, he felt like he didn't need to bother with common courtesy either. The cultivator from Infinite Mountain smiled when he saw that Yi Futian didn't answer him. With a wave of his palm, infinite divine swords appeared between heaven and earth instantly, pointing directly at Yi Futian. Even a peak Renhuang of the ninth realm was making a move now. If so, I am going to have to see for myself just how strong is Emperor Ye's cultivation. Despicable creature! A voice shouted as someone rushed straight into the sky. Heading towards the sky above, it was Blind Tai. A peak Renhuang of the ninth realm had dared attack Yi Futian. All the cultivators from Divine Prefecture cast a glance at Blind Tai. A humongous and boundless handprint appeared above the sky, then blasted down on Blind Tai. It was from a Renhuang of the ninth realm from Futian clan. His clothing fluttered, and he had an extraordinary temperament. With a raise of his hand, he managed to suppress the void with a single palm strike. Blind Tai shouted angrily, and his whole body was radiant. As the divine glory upon him skyrocketed, a divine hammer appeared, smashing into the giant palm that came slamming down. Loud booming sounds were heard as a dull groaning came from above the sky. Although Blind Tai impeded the other's attack, he was pushed back as well. His upward momentum stopped dead in its tracks. Buzz, buzz. In the direction of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, several Renhuang of the ninth realm levitated into the air. However, at this time, many Renhuang from various principalities of the Divine Prefecture also stepped forward, blocking their way above the void, detaining them. "This is a little overboard, Emperor," she said, as his figure was also moving upward. But an elder from Divine Prefecture interceded. "It's just an exchange. There is no need to worry. Rest assured, the Divine Prefecture and the original realm is one, and we will not harm Emperor Yi." As he finished speaking, an invisible pressure of might shrouded the boundless space. Although the alliance of the Heavenly Mandate Academy was a strong one, it paled in comparison with the many forces from Divine Prefecture. Especially at the top level, it was nearly impossible for them to compete with the other. However, from a distance, cultivators were rushing this way one after the other. They were cultivators from the Lost Clan. As soon as they got wind of the situation here, more and more of them hurried to the Heavenly Mandate Academy. But the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture had isolated the battlefield, nor were they really that concerned about the cultivators from the Lost Clan. This was not the Shinny continent, and without that super grand matrix, the arrival of the Lost Clan meant nothing and changed nothing. Above the firmament, in the vast expanse of space, the battlefield now stretched over a tremendous distance. After all, when someone at their caliber fought, just a wave of a hand could cover an area thousands of miles wide. The top figure from Infinite Mountains raised his hand, and countless divine swords dropped down from the sky, and every one of them was tremendously monstrous, aiming at Yi Futian with a terrifying sound as they tore through the space. In the great path domain where these divine swords descended, there was some hindrance, but the person who made the move this time was someone in the ninth realm. Therefore, even the great path aura in the Dominion could not completely stop the divine swords. The stars flowed and shattered some swords, but those divine swords were everywhere in the sky, burying this corner of the sky without end. Boundless. Many looked up. Over there, the boundless divine child was of the ninth realm in this newest wave of engagement. If he took action, it would probably be impossible for Yi Futian to compete with him. Nonetheless, this battle was no longer a fair fight. Yi Futian was surrounded by a starry light screen. which created an absolute defense. But as that sky full of divine swords rained down and loud rumbling sounds came out, the stars, including where Yi Futian was, were knocked back, then shattered. Yi Futian kept retreating while the infinite divine swords between heaven and earth were still attacking forward. Bang, bang, bang. The divine swords blasted in front of Yi Futian's body and collided with him. Many divine swords crumpled, but Yi Futian was also knocked backward again as a muffled groan came out of him. A horrific storm of swordsmanship enveloped this corner of the sky, and the infinite divine sword suddenly stopped in the sky above Yi Futian, but still pointed at him. Boundless Divine Child was a supreme cultivator in the ninth realm, and he was reputed to be exceptionally talented. He was already a top cultivator in the boundless domain, so for him to take action against Yi Futian, who was in the seventh realm, was not an honorable deed. The cultivators from Heavenly Mandate Academy below watched with increased concern, but old Ma said, "Don't worry, he can handle it." Previously, he had gone to Four Corner Village with Yi Futian when Yi Futian brought back the body of Xinjia, the Great Emperor. Yi Futian would surely bring out the divine corpse in the battle if he were truly in danger. These people would have no way of dealing with that just yet. However, it was still a bit too much. Emperor Yi doesn't plan to release the true form of the boundary wheel for us to see. All the cultivators from Divine Prefecture stared at Yi Futian. They were waiting for him to reveal all his cards. They wanted to see all of the secrets that Yi Futian was harboring. However, even now, they still couldn't figure him out. "Don't worry, you have my word that you will not be harmed. We just want to see how strong you are," the boundless Divine Child continued. The vast space around them was surrounded by divine light, protecting Yi Futian inside. Yi Futian glanced at these cultivators. His eyes were cold to the extreme. He stretched out his hand, wanting to release the Emperor's corpse. "I know that you controlled the body of Xinjia, the Great Emperor, but if you are really thinking about using it, you must consider whether or not you would be able to keep it," someone said nonchalantly, with a slight suggestion of threat. These cultivators from Divine Prefecture were all plotting against Yi Futian for the Great Emperor's inheritance that he possessed. If Yi Futian were to unleash the body of the Xinjia, the Great Emperor, those cultivators who had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path would not simply stand by and watch. Clearly, Yi Futian understood this as well. He surveyed those people and asked, "So you are determined to force me to fight today?" Even now, he still didn't want to offend these principalities from the Divine Prefecture too well. Under the current situation in the original realm, what he wanted the most was to cultivate quietly to improve himself. However, if these people from the Divine Prefecture wouldn't let him go, then he would have no choice but to unite the cultivators from the Lost Clan and fight back. "Just want to take a look at Emperor Ye's methods," said another cultivator from the Ancient God Clan, with divine light lingering. All of them were supreme cultivators. He continued, "Here, today, this may be the best of the best from the Divine Prefecture." As Yi Futian surveyed these cultivators, invisible currents from him swept toward the boundless space, moving in at these cultivators. At this moment, these peak figures from the Divine Prefecture had a look of curiosity. It seemed that Yi Futian finally decided not to cover up his boundary wheel. Boom, boom, boom. Brilliant divine light surrounded these cultivators as they gathered around Yi Futian. Every one of their auras were beyond terrifying, and their majestic style was second to none. When the divine light of the Great Path bloomed, a horrific aura condensed and emerged. They were ready to take action. However, right now, above the firmament, there was a sudden shower of divine light. This divine light was incomparably radiant and fell directly on the battlefield as if coming from outside the sky. What? Those top figures from Divine Prefecture looked into the sky. They were completely unaware of anyone coming. Every divine consciousness now aimed toward the sky and saw that in that sky full of divine light, there was a figure who now walked towards the battlefield below. In the midst of the endless divine light, a woman emerged, like Futian goddess, who descended with divine glory. She bathed in the warm glow of the sun, with magnificent stature and a face that was incomparably ravishing. She was arrogant, noble, and elegant, as if she was not of this world. When their eyes beheld her, many cultivators from Heavenly Mandate Academy gasped. They watched the goddess who appeared above the sky with disbelief and shock. Futian was showered with endless divine glory as he raised his head to look above the firmament. When he saw the goddess who came with this incomparable divine light, he could no longer look away. Chapter 2369. We Meet Again. Who is she? The cultivators from Divine Prefecture secretly marveled at her. As they looked at Futian, it seemed that her eyes were fastened on him as well. Futian was also looking at her. This white-haired Renhuang who stood high above the void, the premier genius talent of Heavenly Mandate Realm, the college chief of Heavenly Mandate Academy, Palace Lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace, master of Four Corner Village, and the heir of Ziwei the Great, Xinjia the Great Emperor, as well as Shanin the Great. At this moment, in those arrogant eyes of his, there was nothing but endless tenderness. An extremely brilliant smile appeared at the corners of his eyes. The smile was so pure, and the eyes so clear. It was hard to imagine that someone who had cultivated to a level such could still be capable of such pure emotions. Even those who were not connected understood that the woman who appeared must be Futian's beloved. The beautiful eyes of the goddess who appeared in the void stared back at Futian. The two looked at each other across the void, sharing an infinite affection for one another. She smiled with such beauty, without that coldness or pride, and without that ethereal temperament. All that was left was pure and simple beauty. At this moment, Futian felt as if they were lifetimes away. In his mind, he couldn't help but think of the time when they laid eyes on each other for the first time. He knew that the one whom he had loved so deeply had finally returned to him as her whole self. Even though she had gone through the ordeal of the walk-in, she had found herself and come back to him. She is back. From the direction of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, Lord Taixian whispered to himself. More importantly, this was not the Huajiu he had known from the Heavenly Mandate Academy once upon a time, but the Huajiu that Futian had always known and loved. She was quite different from when he had met her before. Back then, they had cautioned Futian to be careful of Huajiu. Back then, in the realm of Brahma's pure sky, the Empress's cultivation was at the peak of Renhuang, and the method of her cultivation was something peculiar. She had a secret method that had since been lost, and no one knew of its origin, known as the 3,000 realms of one mind. It had the means to walk in or seize another person's physical entity for the user's own purpose. They believed then that Huajiu had been used by the Brahma's pure sky empress, and they worried that Futian might be entrapped and also end up being used by her. Huajiu at that time was indeed an unfamiliar entity to Futian, like a blank piece of paper. Futian had been quietly guarding and looking after her. But now, seeing Huajiu smile, the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy realized that the wife Futian had been missing had finally returned to him. It seemed that she had been right in heading over to Divine Prefecture at the time, and it seemed that in the battle where Futian perished, she had already begun to recover from her trauma and had become self-aware. Not only did Brahma's pure sky empress fail to take over her consciousness, but she was also ultimately overtaken by Huajiu instead. That year, the group that went to the Divine Prefecture had already returned to the Heavenly Mandate Academy, except Huajiu. According to them, Huajiu left to follow her own cultivation path, and no one knew where she went. Today, she returned alone, precisely when Futian was besieged and suppressed by all the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture. Futian couldn't help but smile. In addition to the gentleness in his eyes, there was also a touch of sadness. He wasn't sad about this moment, but for all the years that had passed. In all those years, they had been apart more often than they had been together. Now they met again after more than 20 years. "Fox, it's been a long time." Yi Futian smiled brightly and reached out with his hand. Even across the void, he instinctively reached out for her hand. Hearing this familiar and yet strange term of endearment, Hua Jiu's eyes, which were full of bright smiles, suddenly filled with tears. 2 teardrops flowed down on her ravishing visage, leaving 2 wet trails on that delicate face. No one had called her Fox for what seemed like a lifetime. She hadn't heard it for too many years. This was from back when they were still so young. Now, they had experienced and been through so much together. "It has been a long time." Hua Ji smiled as she cried. She moved toward Yi Futian. This distance, short though it may be, seemed to be thousands of miles long. After deaths and separations, she was forced to cultivate after being invaded by the Empress. In an attempt to help her reclaim her memories, Yi Futian took her to all the places they had been when they were together. However, when she woke up again, what she saw was Yi Futian besieged and slaughtered. For her, it was unspeakably traumatic. Decades were nothing but a blink of an eye in the cultivation world. No one else could know what these 2 decades meant to her. When she woke up, he was already gone. Her body moved in the direction where Yi Futian was. Surrounded by divine light, she was so exceptionally gorgeous. However, this happy scene was frowned upon by the cultivators from Divine Prefecture, who had laid siege on Yi Futian. They had planned to deal with Yi Futian once and for all, forcing him to release the last of his abilities so they could unearth his secrets. But just at the most crucial moment, they had been interrupted by the appearance of Hua Jiu. Her sudden appearance was too breathtaking to ignore. She came from outside of the firmament, surrounded by divine light, just like Ju Tian goddess descending into this world. She came with an unparalleled light. However, she clearly was not the Jitane goddess, a being from out of this world, but a woman who was Yi Futian's beloved. Moreover, under the divine light from this woman, her aura was actually rather terrifying. It was the aura of a peak Renhuang with a perfect, great path. The divine light was so dazzling that the onlookers felt they couldn't see anything clearly. Yi Futian's beloved had a higher cultivation level than him. Yi Futian himself was already the #1 genius talent in all of the heavenly mandate realm. He was extremely gifted. How could it be that his beloved was even stronger than him? The various forces in the Divine Prefecture had inquired into Yi Futian's past and his cultivation history. They knew some things about him and that he had a wife. However, as far as their information went, Yi Futian's wife did not seem to be an outstanding character, so they did not bother to inquire further. They didn't know anything about Hua Jiu and had no clue why her realm was higher than Yi Futian's. Only the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy knew anything about this. They knew that Brahma's pure sky empress was the one who made Hua Jiu. However, even if Brahma's pure sky empress was here, this shouldn't be the kind of aura she was capable of. They could feel that Hua Jiu appeared very different than how she used to. Yi Futian and Hua Jiu walked towards each other with smiles on their faces. It was as if everyone that surrounded them had nothing to do with them. In their eyes, there were only the 2 of them. After experiencing many deaths and separations, they had finally met again after more than 20 years. They didn't intend to be separated again. Today, no matter who wanted to step between them, it would not happen. Not even those top enchanting figures from the Divine Prefecture could interfere. Seeing that Hua Jiu was about to enter this area, the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture glanced at her coldly. Soon after, the Vajra divine child was heard scolding her, "Get back." His voice sounded like a mighty bell, resonating between heaven and earth. It seemed that the divine power of the Vajra region leaped out fiercely. slamming violently towards Huajiu. A series of Vajra divine seals had manifested in the space as if to vent the anger that he felt when he had been defeated by Yi Futian. Huajiu lowered her head and cast a sideways glance at the Vajra divine child. At this moment, those beautiful eyes that had held endless tenderness suddenly became extremely icy. Infinite divine light erupted. In an instant, this vast world seemed to stand still, and those Vajra divine seals stopped dead in their tracks in the void as well. The eyes of the divine child were filled with great terror as countless images now invaded his divine consciousness. Above the firmament, divine light showered upon him. Boom! Huajiu continued to step downward, and the Vajra divine child groaned as his face turned pale, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 2370. Prearranged. What they saw in front of them, horrified these cultivators. Great shocks were written all over their faces. Could she be this powerful? That was the Vajra divine child. Even with attacks fueled by the Vajra divine power, he could not get closer to his opponent. At the same time, the Vajra divine child was injured badly and was now vomiting blood. Before this, even Yi Futian had not been able to achieve this result. It took a great battle for him to drive back the Vajra divine child in defeat. Even though Huajiu was a Renhuang of the ninth realm, the combat effectiveness of the Vajra divine child should be more than sufficient to deal with someone in the general vicinity of the ninth realm. Even if she was a genius cultivator of the ninth realm, he should not be defeated to this extent. It was obvious that Huajiu's strength was extremely powerful. Attack of the spiritual soul. All the attention was now fixed on that peerless goddess. She was surrounded by divine light, like the Futian goddess who had made her presence known in the mortal world. With just a thought, she had severely injured the Vajra divine child, and no one knew how much of her strength had powered that attack. There is a will of the Emperor. Looking at that beautiful woman and sensing the divine light flowing about her, as well as her aura of the great path, many felt a hint of divine power. It was the will of the Emperor on Huajiu's person. There was also some will of the Emperor that could be detected. It was the same as those cultivators from the ancient god clan. She might have the inheritance of the great Emperor in her possession. Those cultivators from the divine prefecture who had survived the divine tribulation of the great path couldn't be more surprised. This woman, who had appeared out of nowhere, had exhibited such impressive fighting powers. Furthermore, her divine power was so strong that she was actually not any lesser than Shi Qiyao, the goddess of West Imperial Palace, who had previously fought in a friendly exchange with Yi Futian. It was important to note that Shi Qiyao was the most talented person from the West Imperial Palace in the past 1,000 years. She was most in sync with the inheritance of the West Emperor. She was in control of the eyes of the West Emperor, which demonstrated the power she had inherited. However, Huajiu's aura was no lesser than Shi Qiyao, which could only indicate that she had also synced perfectly to the inheritance of a great emperor. It appears that she has gotten a wonderful opportunity in the land of divine prefecture, someone whispered in the direction of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Huajiu had defeated the Brahma's pure sky empress and turned her thousands of incarnations into one, all of them unified inside her physical body. The Huajiu they had seen years ago was already one with the Brahma's pure sky empress and all of her other incarnations. They didn't expect that after she departed for divine prefecture, she would have the chance to obtain imperial-level inheritance. This was truly fortuitous. Yi Futian and Huajiu appeared to be cultivators with great fortunes, and such fortunate cultivators were an extreme rarity. However, Huajiu didn't care about anyone else's gaze at this moment. After she repelled the Vajra divine child, she continued her way towards Yi Futian. Her eyes were still so gentle. Yi Futian, on the other hand, didn't care much about Huajiu's current strength. None of that mattered. What was important was that she was back in the truest sense of the word. Beneath the lingering divine light, Hua Ji walked into the crowd. At this moment, no one rushed in to stop her. Obviously, the strength she had just displayed was somewhat astounding. Her ability to repel the Vajra divine child with just a thought meant that her combat effectiveness was not any lesser than those Renhuang in the ninth realm from the ancient god clan. It would not be easy to stop her. Those few moments seemed like an eternity. It was as if after a long, long time, the two of them finally walked back onto the same path. Yi Futian looked at the face that was so close to him. It was so familiar, and his smile became even brighter. Hua Ji was just the same. It was as if all the beauty of the world was alive in her smile. The two of them held hands. There was too much they wanted to say to each other, yet not a word was uttered. Yi Futian reached out with his hand and stroked her cheek. All of this was like a dream. It must have been rough for her in Divine Prefecture all these years. However, the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture didn't seem to want to allow this beautiful scene to continue. Tyrannical auras suddenly descended, falling on the two of them, breaking that peaceful silence. We didn't expect Emperor Ye's path companion to be so outstanding. Since that's the case, let us see for ourselves what that's like, said a voice. The person who had spoken was the boundless divine child. When his voice fell, those countless divine swords once again slammed down from the void, heading straight for Yi Futian and Hua Jiu. Hua Jiu and Yi Futian were still staring at each other, not their heads. Buzz! On Hua Jiu, an astounding divine light suddenly burst out, sweeping through all the surrounding space. Her long black hair flew in the wind, and in an instant, an amazing divine consciousness shrouded the boundless space. The entire spatial world was shrouded by an extraordinary telekinetic power. Those billions of divine swords that came down suddenly slowed down, and there was a hint that they were about to stop. It was as everything in this space threatened to stop dead in their tracks. When all the cultivators saw this, there was a slight trembling in their hearts. The boundless divine child was also a Renhuang of the ninth realm. Could his offensive power be so easily stymied? However, his expression remained unchanged. He scanned the area in front of him, raising his hand, then quickly pushed his hand down. Suddenly, infinite divine swords whistled and howled, overwhelming that corner of the sky. Hua Jiu frowned slightly. She turned her head, and a touch of coldness flashed through her eyes. At this moment, she seemed different than how she was before. The divine light lingered as her mind connected with heaven and earth. Her eyes swept towards the billions of divine swords that covered the sky and the sun. In an instant, this space seemed to stand still as those endless divine swords clamored, wanting to come in for the kill, but they couldn't move an inch. That oppressive force blocked the momentum of the divine swords, making this space even more suppressed. Dunk! Boundless divine child stepped forward. At the same time, the other cultivators from ancient god clan who were around him took action as well. Supreme and awesome divine power of the great path spread out from them, suppressing the two people in the center of it all with total aggression. Even if she was a peak figure in the ninth realm, what could she do? She still couldn't stop their attack on Yi Futian. However, at this time, above the firmament, there was a terrifying aura that came emerged. The top figures from the divine prefecture were the first to act. They frowned and glanced above when they felt the presence of a frightening storm. Someone else is here. They all felt a strange feeling now. Then a terrifying aura fell from the sky, and there was a shocking demonic might that tossed and roared. Everyone looked up into the sky and saw that a mighty procession had come into their view. People from the devil world. The cultivators from Divine Prefecture scanned the area high above the sky, wondering if the cultivators from the devil world had come to meddle in these affairs as well. However, when the group descended, they realized that it didn't seem to be the same group from the devil world as before, but was instead another group of people. It seemed that they were other cultivators from the devil world. Furthermore, the person in the lead was not the Devil Emperor's direct disciple, Xiao Mu, nor was he the demon sage from the Devil World. He was another young man, strapping and substantial. He was draped in a black, demonic armor, and he was completely pitch black in appearance with a head of long black hair that fell upon his shoulders. A sense of immense dominance exuded from his entire body. This cultivator also appeared to be quite young. So who could this be? The cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy showed a look of disbelief when they saw this young man. Did they all make a pact to come back together on this day? Chapter 2371. Together Again. Those who cultivated at the Heavenly Mandate Academy were familiar with this newcomer on the scene. He and Yi Futian used to be inseparable. He was his best brother-in-arms. Although his reputation was not as well known as Yi Futian's, the old-timers at Heavenly Mandate Academy were well aware that his combat effectiveness was extremely powerful, not any less than Yi Futian. Moreover, the Devil General, Mei Ting, had once come to the Heavenly Mandate Academy just for him. Later, when Gu Donglu and the others departed for the Divine Prefecture, they took him to the Devil World. Now Hua Jiu, who had been cultivating in the Divine Prefecture alone, had returned. Yu Sheng, who had been cultivating in the Devil World, did the same. All this seemed to be a coincidence, but more likely it was not, because the original realm was now mired in turmoil. Cultivators from all of the worlds had descended. Whether it was Hua Jiu, who cultivated in the Divine Prefecture, or Yu Sheng from the Devil World, they must have heard something about what was happening now. Therefore, it was not surprising for them to show up at this critical juncture. Currently, the attention of all the worlds was focused squarely on the original realm. What's his position in the Devil World? The cultivators wondered as they assessed Yu Sheng. With so many cultivators from the Devil World guarding him in the center, Yu Sheng received some very special treatment. It was similar to when Xiao Mu had descended on the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Could it be that he was also accepted as a direct disciple by the Devil Emperor? But it didn't add up. Before Yu Sheng had gone to the Devil World to cultivate, Mei Ting, the Devil General, had personally arrived in the Heavenly Mandate Academy to find him for the express purpose of taking him to the Devil World. This meant that Yu Sheng already had some relationship with the Devil World even before he had gone there. His status in the Devil World may have something to do with his origin. If so, what was Yu Sheng's true status? If Yu Sheng's origin was unusual or extraordinary in any way, then what about Yi Futian? How did the two of them get to know each other? Why did they grow up together? And what was hidden in their shared history? Yi Futian looked there as well, bright smiles in his eyes. This guy had come back, and he was different than before. The hefty dude who used to follow him around was now someone filled with boundless domineering spirit. Like himself, Yu Sheng was now a peak Renhuang, standing at the top of the cultivation world. He must have made great progress in the Devil World. It seemed that he had made the right decision to go there. However, Yi Futian couldn't help but wonder who his foster father was. And Yu Sheng, what was his relationship with the Devil World? However, none of this was important at the present moment. Surely, he would know the answers in the future. The most important thing was that his beloved and his best friend had both returned to his side. It felt just like many, many years ago. Yu Sheng, Yi Futian called with a smile. Yu Sheng. When those people from the top forces in the Divine Prefecture heard this name, they remembered someone. During their investigation into Yi Futian's past, they had uncovered another person who was also extremely outstanding. Compared to Yi Futian's wife, Hua Jiu, this person was far more eye-catching. They knew that this person had grown up alongside Yi Futian, always by his side. More importantly, it was said that his combat effectiveness was extraordinary, comparable to Yi Futian's. Later on, when a group of people from the Heavenly Mandate Academy departed for the Divine Prefecture, he disappeared. Rumor had it that he was handpicked by the Devil General of the Devil World himself. Because of his supreme demonic talent, he was taken to the devil world to cultivate. It was very possible that he was destined to be a demonic cultivator. Now he had returned, and from his aura and where he was standing, everyone realized that he must have achieved an extraordinary position in the devil world. Could it be that he was a really direct disciple of the Devil Emperor? If so, it meant that his demonic talent was much higher than imagined. Otherwise, he would not have been taken to the devil world, where he was valued by the Devil Emperor himself. However, the eyes of some cultivators from the ancient god clan flickered. They seemed to be considering another possibility. All this was way too strange, to say the least. If Yu Sheng had such an extraordinary talent, Yi Futian must be the same. Both of them were top genius talents in the world, and the existence of just one of them was already a rare enough find. Not even the ancient god clan could find anyone as outstanding as this. But for two such extraordinary figures to appear in the same place and having grown up together, it was intriguing, to say the least. They returned to their previous conclusion that there must be something secretive about Yi Futian's origin. What kind of secrets was he harboring? This is getting more and more interesting. Shi Qiyao watched everything with those beautiful eyes of hers, a smile on her face. First with Huajiu, then the arrival of Yu Sheng with the cultivators from the devil world. The situation here was becoming more precarious by the minute. As soon as Yu Sheng heard Yi Futian's voice, he stepped into the void. Though he did not say a word, he was walking in the direction where Yi Futian was. Behind him, peak characters from the devil world watched him quietly without following. Who would dare provoke the devil world when they were standing guard here? These people from the divine prefecture were not that fearless, just yet. Yu Sheng traversed through the crowd to enter the battlefield until he was next to Yi Futian and Huajiu. Obviously, he had already seen Huajiu, and he was indescribably happy to see the two of them back together again. Not too bad. Your cultivation has caught up with mine. Yi Futian punched Yu Sheng jokingly, a bright sunny smile on his face. He thought that his cultivation speed was extremely fast already, coupled with many fortuitous adventures, and as having received the inheritance from several great emperors. Each time, it had sped up his cultivation considerably. But Yu Sheng's cultivation was comparable to his. Yu Sheng was now also a Ren Huang in the seventh realm. Yi Futian had no idea how his cultivation had come about. Hua Jiu's cultivation was strong, but she was an exception as this was not the result of normal cultivation. Yu Sheng's cultivation should be something that was achieved more traditionally. Yu Sheng, however, revealed a rare smile. He was extremely happy in his heart that they finally got to see each other again. As for his cultivation, after he had gone to the devil world, the cultivation resources at his disposal were not something that Yi Futian could have imagined, so his progression was very speedy. He had thought that Yi Futian would have fallen behind. "I'm late," said Yu Sheng. His first words were to blame himself for not getting there in time. Here, Yi Futian was being besieged and bullied by these pieces of garbage from the divine prefecture. Since birth until now, Yi Futian had always been his soft spot. When they were young, it had always been Yi Futian who protected him in front of his father. But since their youth, he had been the one who protected Yi Futian when they were away. His father always said that he was born to be a general and that he must guard the man in front of him with his life. This had become an instinct for him, and he had never wavered in this belief. Furthermore, everything Yi Futian had done for him convinced him that this was the right thing to do. Their brotherhood was forged by life and death. Either one of them would be more than willing to protect the other no matter the cost. "You are not late. Just in time, actually," Yi Futian said with a laugh. "It's been many years. You and I have not fought together. Today, bullies here intend to do their worst just because their cultivation is greater than mine. Now that you are here, we could take them on together." Not only did these people from Divine Prefecture not backing down, they even attempted to harm Huajiu in their pursuit to continue persecuting him. It seemed that this battle was unavoidable. Good, Yusheng nodded. Just as before, no nonsense. Just a simple word of acknowledgement. Chapter 2372. Heavenly Demon, Godly Advent. When those top figures heard Yi Futian's words, they were still tranquil. There was not much change in their appearances. Hua Jiu in the 9th realm, Yu Shang in the 7th realm, and Yi Futian, who was also in the 7th realm. Did just the three of them really intend to take on these top figures from the Divine Prefecture? Although the Vajra Divine Child and the heir of Yuanshi Palace had been defeated previously, there were 2 cultivators in the 8th realm. Among those who came from the Divine Prefecture, there were still many who had not yet taken action until now. None of these people could be considered weak. They had cultivators in the 9th realm as well. How could Yi Futian and the other 2 fight that? Even though Hua Jiu exhibited some supreme combat effectiveness, it was still not enough. It would take at least several times this strength to defeat all of these challengers. As things stood now, it was not even close. At this time, Yi Futian surveyed the cultivators and said, I didn't want to provoke anyone, but all of you who came from the Divine Prefecture insisted on being aggressive. In the name of wanting to examine my cultivation, you know what it is that you are really after. Since you are aching for a fight, I have no choice but to oblige. In addition, you are all at a higher realm than me. Even Peak Rinhuang in the 9th realm did not hesitate to bully me. Under these circumstances, know that I will give it all that I've got. At that level of cultivation, the gap between 9th realm and the 7th realm was a vast chasm. For the boundless Divine Child in the 9th realm to raise his hand against Yi Futian was something dishonorable. Those from the Divine Prefecture were quite indifferent when they heard what Yi Futian had to say. Maybe he would fight using the body of Xinjia, the great emperor. Perhaps this was the only way for Yi Futian to possibly shake them. However, if Yi Futian were to do so, no one knew what kind of great battle would erupt. Clang! At this moment, a violent sound suddenly rang out between heaven and earth. In the vast space, an incomparably gorgeous, golden, divine glory bloomed. Everyone was taken by surprise. As their eyes turned to look in the direction of the light, they realized it was where the Vajra Divine Child was located. At this moment, the clothing covering the upper body of the Vajra Divine Child exploded and revealed a golden body. Countless divine lights were lingering upon this body, faintly forming a pattern that circulated inside him. How could this be? The cultivators from Divine Prefecture stirred. He is urging the secret arts to coax forth all of his combat effectiveness. The cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy watched with close attention. All the cultivators from the ancient god clan had many tricks up their sleeves that contained amazing strength. The Vajra Divine Child was no different. His cultivation was in the 8th realm. With a title like the Divine Child, his defensive and offensive techniques were understandably unparalleled. But previously he was defeated by Yi Futian, followed by an injury inflicted by Hua Jiu's mind strike. How could someone as proud as him endure what had just happened? To him, today's battle was utterly humiliating. For that reason, the Vajra Divine Child did not hesitate to resort to the secret arts. The cultivators from the Vajra region were solemn when they witnessed what was happening before them. They did not attempt to stop him. Clearly, they knew what the Divine Child was trying to do, but this was his own choice. In this battle, win or lose, it was all on him. After all, this confrontation was instigated by the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture first. Boom! Infinite divine light erupted from him, covering the boundless space. The Vajra Dominion appeared once again, shrouding this corner of the sky. However, with the blooming of Vajra, the figure of the Divine Child seemed to have disappeared. Or rather, he had reincarnated as the god of the Vajra region, who is now part of heaven and earth. An infinitely massive divine shadow appeared. Before this, the shadow was controlled and attacked by the Vajra Divine Child, but at this moment, the two merged into one. In the vast world, infinite golden divine light was pouring into his body. Above that godlike figure, infinite divine power was pouring into it as well. The aura was more terrifying than before. It far surpassed anything capable by the mere existence of Ren Huang in the 8th realm. It was as if he had transcended his existing realm. Horrific divine light shot out from the eyes of the Vajra divine god, swept over Yi Futian and the 2 others. He must avenge his shame. In the far distance, the cultivators inside Heavenly Mandate City were truly shocked by what they saw. What was going to happen in this battle? The 3 of them glanced in the direction of the Vajra divine child, and their expressions did not change one little bit. As divine glory shining, hovering in front of Yi Futian, he said to Yu Sheng, "Yu Sheng, how about you direct the fight?" "No problem," Yu Sheng nodded in acknowledgement. Immediately, Yi Futian levitated into the air, sitting cross-legged. Wisps of divine glory now permeating between heaven and earth, and the sound of rhythm could be heard. In the vast space, suddenly, traces of the great path's Guqin music could be detected. A brilliant divine light twinkled, and it was none other than the Guqin named Yearning that appeared in front of Yi Futian. When Yearning appeared, all the strings of the great path in the space seemed to light up with even more radiant divine light, intertwined with the Guqin itself. The cultivators from the divine prefecture could clearly feel the real divine power contained within that instrument. Guqin from Shenin the Great. This Guqin was acquired by Yi Futian on the dragon turtle, inherited from Shenin the Great. He had never used it in any of the battles before, but no one dared to underestimate the power behind this Guqin. This was a bona fide divine item, which contained the soul of Shenin the Great. It was, in a sense, the continuation of Shenin the Great's life force. Yi Futian had already said that he would do all that he could, and it seemed that he was being serious, with cultivators in the 9th realm taking shots at him, who could fault him even if he was resorting to a divine item. Hua Jiu saw Yi Futian taking out the Guqin, as she stood quietly by Yi Futian's side, with amazing divine light also blooming on her, moving between heaven and earth. Her clothing lightly fluttered. It was just as if the Ju Tian goddess herself was guarding him. Yu Sheng stepped forward and standing out in front. He raised his head and glanced at the Vajra ancient god above the firmament. A shocking demonic light emitted from his eyes. Boom! Traces of shocking demonic light bloomed from Yu Sheng, heading toward this world. Likewise, a force was also being urged inside his body, which strengthened his aura as it continued to rise. The demonic might tossed and roared as an incomparable demon god appeared, with the aura of the great emperor. Indeed, Yu Sheng has gotten the true inheritance of the devil emperor. The hearts of many trembled, as Yu Sheng was urging on the emperor's will. Clearly, he had also inherited the capability of a great emperor, and it seemed that he had integrated the will into his own demonic body, perfectly as one. This discovery further confirmed to the others that Yu Sheng's origin was likely astounding. However, could the gap between realms really be made up? The Vajra divine child at this moment was incredibly powerful. Boom, boom, boom. Just as this thought came into their minds, demon-like figures appeared next to Yu Sheng. Each of the demon gods had a different face and aura. It was as if they had been called into existence. However, each demon god contained an unimaginable demonic power never seen before. When they saw the sight in front of them, the blood of these cultivators from the divine prefecture ran cold. 6 demon gods. Heavenly demon godly advents, one of the most powerful methods of the devil emperors, and he actually learned it. Some of the old-timers from divine prefecture trembled fiercely. It was said that only a few people were ever able to control this skill, and very rarely did any of the devil emperor's direct disciples ever cultivate this particular method. How could Yu Sheng know how to control the heavenly demon godly advent? Chapter 2373 Severed Arm. The 6 demon gods stood tall with the world under their feet, their demonic might roaring like rolling thunder, as if they were each the master of millions of demons. Each of the auras of their demon arts, which flowed on them, were unique from each other. Yu Xing stood in the center with a solemn expression. As his demon might surged and roared, he raised his head and looked towards the divine child of the celestial Vidra region. Just then, golden divine light spanning more than 10,000 miles streamed down from the skies. One after another, terrifying voices of the great path echoed out from. It was as though these formless sounds could shatter the void. In the next instant, the celestial figure exerted an incredibly great divine force as he raised his hand to release a blast. Trillions of golden divine lights shot out, deluging the skies of the region. At the same time, countless Vajra divine seals came raining down. Within them was the strongest divine seal of all, able to destroy space itself. Unmatched demonic blades started forming in each of the 6 demonic gods' hands. Each of the demonic gods had different blade stances. In the next moment, the first swing of the blade was made. The physical world roared as rays of light shot out from the blade and shrouded the skies. Then came the second swing, even more powerful and overwhelming than before. It gushed forward continuously as it was complemented by the sword chi of the first strike. Followed by that, the third swing and the fourth swing. 9 slashes of the heavenly demon. The powerful cultivators around them were shaken to their core. They never thought that Yu Shang would use the 9 slashes of the heavenly demon in tandem with the heavenly demon godly advent. According to legend, this was a technique used only by the Devil Emperor when he conquered the Devil world and crushed countless demon overlords. Now, Yu Shang used the heavenly demon godly advent to perform the 9 slashes of the heavenly demon, slashing 6 continuous times. Each slash was more potent than the last, as the countless sword rays exploded in the air and almost split space and time in the area. The Vajra divine seals were crushed and eradicated. In the middle of it all, the first 6 slashes of the 9 slashes of the heavenly demon fused and emitted a sword ray that spanned more than 10,000 miles, forming a sky-splitting demonic blade that carried a broadsword capable of tearing apart the skies of the region. At last, the sky-splitting demonic blade slashed onto the strongest divine seal at the center. TSS, as the broadsword landed, the divine seal was split through the middle. At the same time, the supremely dominating demonic blade continued to slice towards the figure of the celestial Vajra ancient god. Everything in its way was shattered. The Vajra ancient god's palm slammed down on the skies beneath him. His vast golden divine light erupted, and his Vajra divine powers were exerted to their fullest potential with extreme ferociousness, directly blasting onto the demonic blade. "Break!" Yu Sheng roared. He raised his head to watch the celestial sky, where a demon god projection appeared. It was so large that one could not see where it ended. It slashed out a single broadsword which fused into the demon blade. It was as if the blade carried the will of the demon god himself. The divine seal was split up in an instant, and the arm of the Vajra ancient god was slashed upon. A crack appeared on the arm and started expanding upward. The expression of the god projection above the celestial skies changed into one of shock and fear. The vast divine lights erupted again, and he wielded the full power of the Vajra region. But at this point, it was already futile. The demonic lights inundated the skies. Starting from a thin line, the entire golden dominion was hacked in half while the golden light screen, which shrouded the celestial skies, was shattered. Some could hear an agonized scream coming from inside as a bright red bloodstain appeared from the broken golden lights. Some bits of blood spilled down and scattered into the void. The hearts of many who watched pounded, and all the powerful cultivators looked at the figure who stood in the void, the divine child of the Vajra region. As the light screen shattered and the divine powers within dissipated, they saw a figure appear at the initial spot. It was the divine child of the Vajra region. Shockingly, one of his arms was severed. Clearly, The arm of the celestial god was a manifestation of his arm and had been slashed off by Yusheng. The divine child of the Vajra region had an arm slashed off by Yusheng. He's ruthless. The cultivators of the divine prefecture gasped in their hearts. Yusheng seriously dared to do something so ruthless. An arm slashed off by his demonic blade was a wound on the great path. Even though a Renhuang plane being could regenerate broken limbs, have incredible healing powers, and could survive nearly any injury so long as he was still breathing, if he were wounded by a great path power that was stronger than his own, it would be extremely difficult to recover. If he could exceed the plane of the attack that caused the great path injury or obtain a high-level medication, then he could heal it completely. Otherwise, the severed arm was likely impossible to recover. No one knew if there were ways within the Vajra region to heal it. But the only one ruthless enough to do such a thing was Yusheng. He really showed everyone how ruthless high-level cultivators from the devil world could be, and how bold and fearless they were to inflict such grave wounds upon the divine child from the Vajra region. Even the powerful cultivators from the other ancient god clans of the divine prefecture wouldn't dare do such a thing. The hearts of the high-level cultivators from the Vajra region trembled. Their figures flew into the air, and strands of powerful aura started to erupt. But then one person stopped them, waved his hand, and the many numerous high-level cultivators all temporarily subdued their anger. This was the Vajra divine child's fight. It was his hurdle, and he would have to face it eventually. No matter how powerful he became, there would forever be someone who would overwhelm him. The Vajra divine child had already cultivated to the 8th plane. If he could overcome this setback, then he could grow to become the Vajra region lord. If he fell before this hurdle, he would likely stop at this stage for the rest of his life, and it would be difficult for him to keep his status as the divine child of the Vajra region. Furthermore, this was a fair battle. The person who severed his arm was Yusheng from the devil world, who could have been taught the demonic arts by the devil emperor himself. What could they do about it? Try to get revenge on Yusheng? That would be starting a war with the devil world. The Vajra region was a force of the Vajra domain. They were extremely powerful. But if they were really to start a war with the devil world, they would be overestimating themselves. The devil world was a force that could take on the entire divine prefecture on its own. You can all stop watching now. A cultivator who studied under the devil emperor, the most charming person of the entire heavenly mandate realm, Shenying the great Skuchin and a goddess. What is there to hesitate about? Said a voice. It was a powerful cultivator from the Haochin clan. Since the Vajra divine child had one arm slashed off, the nature of this battle had changed. Before this, they were trying to use their aura and might to force their wills upon Futian, but now, this was a true battle between equals. The cultivators nodded, clearly understanding the situation. Divine lights started circling around their bodies. Instantly, the vast voids were deluged by the might of the great path. The aura emitted from it was terrifying beyond imagination. It encased the entire heavenly mandate city and expanded the battlefield to infinity. Atop the celestial skies, the power of the great path flowed. It was as if someone released the divine wheel of the great path to forge a great path domain. Yusheng shifted his gaze away from the Vajra divine child towards the other cultivators. With that slash just now, he had roughly figured out the power level of the Vajra divine child. However, although the Vajra divine child released his secret arts, he was still only at the 8th plane. The 9th plane cultivators here were surely stronger than an 8th plane cultivator. Therefore, it was a safe bet that his battle would not be easy. Dang, dang. Just then, countless dancing notes entered the ears of all of the cultivators present, causing these powerful cultivators of the divine prefecture to feel an extremely strong will. The will of grief. Each note that entered their ears invaded their will directly and without exception, causing them to feel grief. We can't let him continue playing the divine requiem, someone said as he looked towards where Futian was located. Wherever he looked, Space was being warped and twisted. Chapter 2374. An Empress's Inheritance. The person who intervened wore a lavish robe. It was a faint gold and shone magnificently throughout the area. He was surrounded by powerful divine lights of the great path of space, and his pupils were also gleaming gold. When he looked toward Yi Futian, his gaze warped space as if creating a turbulent storm of physical space, crushing Yi Futian. Hua Jiu, who was standing behind Yi Futian, looked towards the person in return, and an equally powerful but formless force of the great path erupted. Both of them stood still, yet heavy, muffled thumps sounded on the battlefield atop the void. It was as though nuclear blast waves were colliding, causing deep and dark cracks to appear where they came into contact. The man turned his gaze towards Hua Jiu. He was a member of the Jiang ancient god clan of the Taishan domain. The Jiang ancient god clan had extraordinary status in the Taishan domain. Even the House of the Lord of Taishan maintained a friendly relationship with them and gave them ample respect. According to legend, the ancestor of the Jiang ancient god clan obtained the title of Heavenly Emperor Jiang, an extremely powerful being who established the clan. After he had fallen, the bloodline of the Jiang went extinct. So, the Heavenly Emperor Jiang used his supreme divine powers to protect the Jiang clan from being wiped out during the ensuing years of turmoil, which enabled them to pass down their lineage into the present day. The Jiang ancient god clan was rather mysterious. Very few people knew how powerful their full strength was, and no one dared to provoke them. But, naturally, the Jiang ancient god clan was supremely powerful. The person who struck just now was named Jiang Qingfeng. He was the most outstanding individual of this generation in the Jiang ancient god clan. At the peak level Renhuang Plain, barely anyone in the entire Taishan domain could compare with him. Jiang Qingfeng perceived the force from Hua Jiu. He could clearly feel her telekinetic powers fusing into the worldly great path, giving her absolute control over the area. With just one thought, it was as if time froze and all other great paths were banished from the area. Even Jiang Qingfeng's great path of space felt like it was sealed. An even more powerful divine force of space erupted from him. The divine forces of space on him were somehow like extremely sharp blades, cutting through the void and attempting to split open Hua Jiu's powers. Hua Jiu was still standing there as magnificent divine lights of the great path erupted from her. Her eyes were like those of a divine being, colliding with Jiang Qingfeng's gaze. At that moment, it was as though both of them had entered a world of the void. Jiang Qingfeng could only feel a powerful telekinetic force invading his consciousness. It felt like the force was corroding his spiritual soul. He saw countless divine projections walk toward him, and each one looked like Hua Jiu's true self rather than just a clone. His heart trembled, and finally, he understood why the Vajra divine child had been wounded. The opponent could directly invade their enemy's consciousness and attack their spiritual soul. Moreover, this was an extremely dominating force that broke into their minds with just a split second of eye contact. "Get out!" A voice sounded in Jiang Qingfeng's mind. Instantly, his consciousness turned into a collapsing world of space. It was as though the fabric of space and time were warping in order to reel in all of the millions of projections he saw and tear them into pieces. However, as the projections were crushed, an endless swarm of them continued to enter Jiang Qingfeng's mind, pressuring him greatly. Even though these projections weren't attacking him, he could still feel their great force. He didn't dare to let down his guard, as it would only take one slip-up for his spiritual soul to be invaded, which would have dire consequences. "Jiang Qingfeng is in trouble," someone said as the crowd looked up toward the arena high above. These high-level cultivators from the ancient god clans of the divine prefecture naturally knew how powerful Jiang Qingfeng was. Yet, even at his level, he was facing trouble from Hua Jiu. More divine lights of the great path of space seethed from Jiang Qingfeng's body, yet he didn't continue to attack. Instead, all of it was bound to him. "Which great emperor's inheritance did she receive?" someone asked in a hushed voice. Both the divine lights on Hua Jiu and the powers that she was releasing showed that she had clearly inherited the powers of one of the great emperors. But which one was it? It seemed that Hua Jiu had absolute control over space and could invade other people's spiritual souls. Just then, a rage-filled roar echoed through the skies. The divine child of the infinite mountain didn't just watch, but he attacked, too. Trillions of divine swords were launched in Yi Futian's direction. However, two projections walked out from Hua Jiu's figure. They were perfect clones of her. Even the aura of the great path on them was almost exactly the same. Exterior incarnation. The group of powerful cultivators once again froze. They couldn't believe that Hua Jiu actually summoned exterior incarnations. Furthermore, the auras of these exterior incarnations were as strong as her true self. Divine lights of the great path erupted from these two exterior incarnations as well, and they were incredibly magnificent. The incarnations raised their heads to look toward the void. Instantly, it was as if the unending stream of divine swords paused in action, and their speed slowed to a halt. How is this woman so powerful? One of the ancient god clan cultivators thought. In the past, which of the great emperors were well versed in these powers? One of the cultivators asked openly, which prompted those around him to contemplate. Absolute control, spiritual soul attack, exterior incarnation. All of the powers that Hua Jiu had released so far were very unique, and they weren't sure which of the great emperors cultivated them. "I think there's one person who did," one of the old cultivators of the ancient god clan said softly. Immediately, the cultivators turned their gaze toward him. The old cultivator explained, "In the ancient era, legend has it that there was a female great emperor. She ruled trillions of living beings and projected trillions of her telekinetic powers to pass on her teachings to the world she ruled over. Every cultivator was influenced by her and thus contributed to her cultivation. She could even directly control these nearly infinite number of lives, and was hence an extremely controversial figure amongst the great emperors. Below the skies, cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy and Original Realm all had astonished expressions on their faces. Was there really a great emperor like that? Back then, Brahma's pure sky empress had an extremely uncanny and unique method of cultivation. It was said that her consciousness was spread across the 3,000 realms, and that she had incarnations in each of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Hua Jiu was one of those who had been influenced by her incarnation. She was almost the victim of a walk-in whereby she would become one of her proxy cultivation furnaces. Yet the powers the Brahma's pure sky empress cultivated were actually inherited from a great emperor from the ancient era. After Brahma's pure sky empress gave Hua Jiu what she wanted, could it be that Hua Jiu found the inheritance of the same great emperor in the divine prefecture? Just as they were speaking, countless musical notes streamed out of nowhere. They wove together into a song of grief, yet carried a powerful, sonorous tone as they landed on the unending array of divine swords. Instantly, it was as if the physical space in the area exploded, destroying the divine swords and forming a thunderstorm of music, sweeping across the world. At the same time, an immense will of grief permeated through all matter in the area, seeping into the eardrums of the cultivators with every note. These notes contained unique mythical powers that directly infiltrated their spiritual souls. The sounds of the guqin contained a will of the great emperor, and all the powerful cultivators present had sensed that their emotions were being influenced. Every single one of them felt the will of grief. Chapter 2375. A Decisive Battle. The surrounding cultivators from the ancient god clan teamed up but felt a mighty pressure nonetheless. Facing Yi Futian and his two companions, they were no longer as confident as before. Whether it was Yu Sheng, Hua Jiu, or Yi Futian himself, these three had far exceeded their expectations. Yu Xing had smashed the arm of the Vajra divine child with a single blow, an injury that caused his opponent to exit the battlefield. Hua Jiu blocked the two ninth realm cultivators with a single telepathic thought. With her guarding by Yi Futian's side, the area around him was impervious to anyone's attack. As for Yi Futian himself, the divine requiem was getting more powerful. The sound of Guqin seemed to contain powerful offensive force enough to destroy the great path. At the same time, sadness shrouded this space along with those beating musical notes. The entire space was under the influence of his rhythm. If it were just Yi Futian alone playing the divine requiem by way of the sonic wave, perhaps he would not have been quite as effective in creating such a strong impact on these people. However, what he held in his hand was the divine Guqin yearning, transformed by the beloved of Shanin the Great. It also incorporated the soul of Shanin the Great as a memorial of their tragic love story. This divine Guqin itself had already carried an extreme sadness, so that every note that jumped out was full of sorrow. It didn't take long for the rhythmic storm to spread to the boundless void, and the entire world seemed to be covered in sorrow. Even Hua Ji was no exception. Under this rhythmic storm, she could feel that sadness as well. Of course, those sonic waves would not be attacking her, but they certainly concentrated all of their power directly on the minds of those cultivators from the divine prefecture. Those Ren Huang in the 8th realm were the first ones who could not bear this overwhelming sense of grief. Take, for instance, the Vajra divine child and the heir of the infinite palace. Although they possessed great willpower, the divine requiem was the dirge of all ages. That sadness, which hid deep within their souls, suddenly sprung forth as great sorrow gushed forth like a fountain. They were meant to be mired in that extreme sadness, and their souls were trapped deep inside the endless sorrow. The cultivation of that cultivator in the 8th realm from Yuanshi Palace was extremely powerful. Terrible divine aurora shot out from his eyes as divine light lingered around him. A terrifying God-punishing will erupted from him, wanting to chase away the sadness, but his emotions were completely out of his own control. His mind recalled scenes long forgotten in the past, and they were all related to emotions hidden deep in his heart. He reached out with his hands and attempted to move, but found that his arms seemed to have stiffened. His will tried to control the power of the great path to execute the attack. But as soon as his mind moved, God-punishing swords whistled, but without the prowess they possessed previously. They seemed to function at a fraction of the power they had once. When his mind was unstable, how could he mobilize the full power of his great path? In Yu Sheng's direction, a figure of the heavenly demon that had been summoned took a look yonder, and then raised his hand to unleash a strike of the sword he held, which destroyed the God-punishing sword will outright, its unstoppable momentum aimed squarely at his opponent. "Watch out!" the cultivator from Yuanshi Palace cautioned as a white-haired elder let out a soul-wrenching shout. So the spiritual soul of the heir from Yuanshi Palace felt almost concussed. However, this unexpected shock seemed to sober up his will a little. He used what little he had to release the most brilliant divine light of the great path. Picture upon picture of God-punishing sword matrix appeared in front of him, fiercely blasting forward. The demonic blade slammed down with mighty force, and those pictures of the matrix were shattered as they were being blasted apart. The body of the Yuanshi Palace's heir flew backward, and the domineering 9 slashes of the heavenly demon left a bloody mark on him. Can't even block it. The hearts of the cultivators from divine prefecture trembled. The Ren Huang in the 8th realm had cultivations higher than Yi Futian and Yu Sheng. But on the battlefield, Yu Sheng had urged the power of the demon gods, while Yi Futian resorted to the divine Guqin of the great emperor. With their impeccable powers united up front, the Ren Huang in the 8th realm were not their equal at all. Of course, Yu Sheng also noticed that several cultivators in the 8th realm were affected by the rhythm. He rose into the air as the 6 demon gods he summoned pulled up the rear to form heavenly demon blades at the same time. Profuse demonic will was now causing considerable obfuscation in the boundless space, while the blades chopped down simultaneously in different directions, trying to crush and expel these Renhuang in the 8th realm out of the battle first. Under the 9 slashes of the heavenly demon sword will appear in the firmament like chaotic swordsmanship that could split open a corner of the sky. As they slammed down, they had no problem finding their targets in different directions. Several top genius talents in the 8th realm resisted with whatever means they had, but the result was the same. All of them were injured with a single blade attack, the force of which knocked them into the far distance. Clang! The sound of Guqin continued to invade their minds, shaking them down. The divine requiem delivered to the listeners a power that was enough to corrupt the spiritual soul. It was now directly attacking the spiritual souls of those cultivators in the 8th realm. A muffled groan came out of them as their faces paled. All of them were injured by the shock. These cultivators from the divine prefecture had been relentless in forcing his hand. After dodging their provocation time and again, with these people refusing to give up, Yi Futian would no longer hold back. These 8th realm cultivators were all enchanting geniuses from top principalities. Although they had their own aces up their sleeves, it was ultimately difficult for them to persist under this kind of orchestrated attack. They found it difficult to play their aces. They were repelled and injured. They had no choice but to extract themselves from the battle. The remaining cultivators in the 9th realm didn't bother to lend a hand either. As soon as they heard this composition, they knew there was no hope for these Renhuang in the 8th realm. Under the blanket effect of the Guqin, even their own emotions were being overwhelmed. Their will and spiritual souls were affected like never before. Therefore, these cultivators in the 8th realm would only be a burden if they stayed. Ultimately, it was left for Yi Futian and Yu Sheng to expel several of these cultivators in the 8th realm off the battlefield and to retire them from battle. The sound of Guqin continued as before. As Yi Futian played, the rhythm was continuing to increase in strength. The vast and boundless world was covered by the rhythm, as traces of invisible sonic waves seeped into the minds of these cultivators in the 9th realm who were still on the battlefield. They stood there quietly, surrounded by the divine light before, but their eyes became more serious. On the ground below, everyone from the divine prefecture quietly watched the situation developing in the void. At this moment, the battlefield was becoming quieter than before, but it seemed way more oppressed as well. There were not many left in that vast area up on high. Yi Futian's party of 3 were up against the 4 Renhuang in the 9th realm from the divine prefecture. These 4 people were already at the peak of the Renhuang realm, and they were well-known figures in the land of the divine prefecture, existences whose names rang throughout the world. But now, these 4 cultivators were facing Yi Futian, Huajiu, and Yu Sheng with only 1 9th realm and 2 7th realm cultivators among them. It seemed that this was not a fair fight at all on the same level. However, considering that Yi Futian was using the divine Guqin, and Yu Sheng had released the demonic secret arts to increase his combat effectiveness, there was a feeling that they actually had the ability to battle these higher-level cultivators. As for the West Imperial Palace, they did not participate in this battle. Shi Qi Yao looked at the battlefield high in the sky, feeling some complicated emotions in her heart. It seemed that she greatly underestimated Yi Futian and his companions. She had thought that Yi Futian was the only top enchanting genius in his circle. She didn't expect that Hua Jiu and Yu Sheng were also existences of a similar caliber. However, this also confirmed her previous belief that Yi Futian was not as straightforward as he appeared. There must be some secrets they didn't know about him. Chapter 2376, Wang Mian of Tianyan City. On that battlefield in the void, the 7 of them simply stood there. Yi Futian sat cross-legged, playing the Guqin, while Hua Jiu stood next to him. There were also avatars guarding them, summoned by Yu Sheng, who had called on the heavenly demons. and in different positions in front of them. For cultivators were Peak Renhuang of the Ninth Realm. They were Hua Junmo of the Haoqing clan in the Nantian domain. He was the older brother of Hua Junlai, who had been defeated by Yi Futian. Pei Sheng, divine child of infinite mountains. Jiang Qingfeng from the ancient god clan's Jiang family in the Taishan domain. Wang Mian from Tianyan City in the Tianyan domain. These 4 major cultivators were Peak Renhuang from their own respective domains. As they stood at the pinnacle of Renhuang, their combat effectiveness was nothing less than extraordinary. And without exception, they were all of them from the ancient god clan. Haotian clan inherited power from Haotian the Great, infinite mountains from Wuliang the Great, the Jiang family from Heavenly Emperor Jiang, Tianyan City in the Tianyan domain from Tianyan the Great himself. Previously, the other 3 cultivators had already taken their shots one after the other. Although they did not mean to cause serious injuries, they had released their true strength. Now, only Wang Mian from Tianyan City had not made his move yet. A sharp, golden, divine glory had been surrounding him, and there was something curious about the divine light that lingered around him. It was as if it could be transformed into thousands of different matrices. In the 18 domains of the divine prefecture, each domain had its own profound history and backstory. In ancient times, prominent figures had emerged out of every one of these domains, and many of them enjoyed the appellation of the Great Emperor. To this day, all 18 domains had retained some of their own particular features. The imperial domain, where Donghuang Imperial Palace resided, needed no further introduction. But other domains also had many surprising peculiarities. The Tianyan domain, for instance, had always been a world-famous alchemical holy land for as long as recorded history. It was said that the Tianyan domain in ancient times had once enjoyed exceptional prosperity, with many famous clans of armorers lining its streets. Countless cultivators from the other worlds came to the Tianyan domain for the express purpose of seeking its ritual implements, accounting for much of its flourishing past. But after the collapse of the heavenly path, every world had experienced its own decline. The Tianyan domain was not as magnificent as it once was, but its heritage for alchemy remained intact, and the ancient god clan had survived. Tianyan the Great was once an existence of the imperial-level alchemist, whose reputation was indisputable. He enjoyed great prestige among his peers. Some said that even today, Tianyan the Great may still exist in another form, such as an item or object to aid another future great being. They also said that he had since remained in Tianyan City. Tianyan City was a city, but it was also a principality. The entire city belonged to the descendants of Tianyan the Great. The Wang family in Tianyan had absolute control over Tianyan City. It was a de facto palace for the Wang family. Because of their armor-making skills, even today, Tianyan City held superiority in all of the divine prefecture. Its strength was tremendous, and Wang Mian, a genius talent from Tianyan City, was said to have the potential to become the future city lord of Tianyan City, ruling over ancient god clan. Wang Mian's gaze now drifted towards Yi Futian. Like everyone else, he had heard the invasive sound of the guqin, and his emotions were somewhat affected. However, those who had cultivated to the peak of Renhuang were not so easily swayed, as they all had to be incredibly determined. Those with stronger realms were less likely to be affected by the sound of the guqin. Of course, it also hinged on Yi Futian's own realm. Had Yi Futian's realm surpassed theirs, they would have been more likely to come under his influence. In truth, I came to the Heavenly Mandate Academy to borrow something from you. Wang Mian looked at Yi Futian and said, "If you are willing to lend it to me, I will leave with the rest of the people from Tianyan City. In the future, I will return to you the thing I borrowed, and Tianyan City will be indebted to you." Everyone from the divine prefecture was quite surprised when they heard what Wang Mian had to say. They looked in the direction where the cultivators from the Wang family in Tianyan had congregated. What did they want to borrow from Yi Futian? Everyone knew the kind of place Tianyan City was. Legend had it that Tianyan City possessed the most powerful ritual implements of all 18 domains. There was even the possibility that an incomparable army may have existed somewhere there because, after all, they highly suspected that Tianyan the Great might still be around. What would Tianyan City possibly need so badly that they had to borrow it from Yi Futian? Unless they all thought of a possibility. Yi Futian's head lowered as he continued playing the guqin. He uttered a word from his mouth. No. He didn't ask him what it was that he wanted to borrow, but whatever item asked for by the ancient god clan would clearly not be something simple or easy. And Yi Futian would never try to entertain anyone like this to neutralize their hostility, no matter who they were. Wang Mian and the other cultivators from Tianyan City fixed their eyes on Yi Futian as they heard his reply. Many watched him with a sharp intention in their eyes, but they weren't offended by it, really. If Yi Futian didn't lend it to them, they would take it from him. Although Yu Sheng and Huaji were here to help Yi Futian today, the reality remained that all the top principalities of various domains from the Divine Prefecture had come here to knock him down. They would never give up so easily. It was almost impossible for Yi Futian to extricate himself from this situation, as it were. Inevitably, he would need to pay in exchange for his own safety. Wang Mian didn't seem to have heard Yi Futian's refusal at all, as he continued, Emperor Yi has the body of Xinjia the Great Emperor, of which Tianyan City is extremely interested. We are hoping that Emperor Yi could let us use the body of Xinjia the Great Emperor. No wonder. The cultivators from the Divine Prefecture were not surprised when they heard what he had said. They had half expected it already. Exactly what kind of principality was the Wang family of Tianyan? They were the #1 armor of the Divine Prefecture, whose power was inherited from Tianyan the Great. Whatever they wanted must have something to do with weapon-making or alchemy. Therefore, there could only be two possibilities. One was the divine guqin, and the other was the corpse of Xinjia the Great Emperor. The divine guqin had integrated the soul of Shinin the Great within it, hence possessing its current power. However, the corpse of Xinjia the Great had already been cast into a superior weapon, and the corpse itself was considered a most excellent and peerless divine weapon. It was just that Yi Futian's realm was not yet high enough to urge its full power. Therefore, Tianyan City was desirous to get their hands on it, hoping to see how Xinjia the Great Emperor managed to achieve such greatness and whether this great emperor's divine body could be deciphered. "Shut your trap!" a cold voice rebuked with mighty dominance. Accompanied by this voice was a terrible demonic light that appeared above the firmament presently. It traversed heaven and earth, smashing down for the kill. The demonic might tossed and roared, slashing at Wang Mian without hesitation. It was Yu Sheng who had unleashed his own attack. Wang Mian could call it borrowing if he liked, but it was really no different than robbing. With all these principalities here to pressure and threaten Yi Futian, could this be considered borrowing? There was a terrifying, golden divine glory in Wang Mian's eyes. He cast one glance forward and watched the demonic blade came down in front of him with unusual calmness. Suddenly, a golden divine wall appeared in front of him, countless runes flowing upon it. Thus, the divine wall that fell from the sky formed a barrier in front of him, as those runes jumped out and erupted into rays of terrible divine aurora. Psst! A sharp and piercing sound came out as a tremendously domineering, heavenly demon blade slammed down. But this dominant demonic blade, capable of splitting the space apart, failed to carve open the divine wall. At the moment when it chopped down, it was as if it landed on the strongest divine wall in the world. The blade broke, but it did not damage the defense. Obviously, the power of this strike still left something to be desired. Wang Mian, peak Renhuang existence from Tianyan City. How powerful was he? When these 4 cultivators started to treat the situation seriously, Perhaps Yi Futian's little party of 3 would not stand a chance of winning. Chapter 2377 Coordination. On the battlefield, Wang Mian's gaze landed on Yi Futian, who was playing the divine guqin. He said, "The divine requiem is indeed strong, but it isn't insuppressible. As long as the space in this area is completely sealed and locked down, what effect could the sounds of the guqin have?" As he spoke, the divine lights on him erupted, and his golden iris looked ahead. Instantly, the divine wall before him expanded rapidly. It looked as if it was flowing and combined the properties of strength and softness. As it levitated, it expanded vertically. The crowd raised their heads and watched the divine wall. Inside, an unending array of divine light beams shrouded the space from the celestial skies to the ground, continuing to move toward where Yi Futian was. Moreover, the divine wall appeared behind Yi Futian as well. Soon, the 3 great cultivators were drowned inside the walls and were mere inches away from being sealed. The sounds of the guqin seemed to be affected as well. The divine prefecture cultivators watched the battlefield quietly. Wang Mian was the heir to the Tianyan Emperor of Tianyan City, so there were no doubts about his power. With Yu Sheng's current plane, it would be very difficult for him to break through Wang Mian's sealing powers. Once the space in that area was sealed, it would be no small feat to break out and escape. All of the greatest cultivators could forge their own dominions, which they would have absolute control over. But Yi Futian didn't even react to it. He was still playing the guqin piece. He didn't move, so Huaju stood quietly by his side and didn't move either. Yu Sheng was in front. His demonic might surged and roared as he stared at the scene before him. Soon, the hexagonal space was completely sealed. The divine wall trapped them within this sealed space, and a magnificent golden divine light erupted from within. "Close!" As the word came out from Wang Mian's mouth, a deep and muffled sound could be heard from inside. Now, as the dominion was formed, the seal had been completed. With the power of this absolute seal, no power of the great path could seep through it, even if it were the formless, great path of rhythm. There was no way the guqin sounds could escape and affect them. As the seal was formed, they all listened for any sounds. Wang Mian wasn't too concerned about the guqin sounds that continued to echo the area, as some parts of the piece were already played previously. Naturally, its power would linger for a while more, but it should dissipate soon. The other 3 great cultivators watched from different locations. If Wang Mian could really seal the 3, then Yi Futian's guqin would be useless. Furthermore, if they could deal with them inside the sealing dominion, perhaps Wang Mian alone would be able to defeat them. They raised their heads and glanced at the void. Just then, waves of sound broke through into their ears. Immediately, the will of grief appeared from deep within their souls. Even their hearts trembled lightly as it happened. The divine requiem seemed to be getting more and more aggrieved, and the storm of rhythm and notes which encased the world around them got stronger as well, as though it had permeated through all matter. As they perceived the rhythmic pulses in the skies of the area, they realized that not only did it not subside, it was getting stronger. Wang Mian felt it too. It only took a moment to sense it. He stared forward, and his gaze passed through the dominion, set by himself to see Yi Futian inside. Yi Futian was still playing the guqin with his head lowered. It seemed like he wasn't affected by the dominion at all. His mentality was also unfazed by the powers of the seal. It was as though he knew from the beginning that the powers of the seal could not block his divine requiem. Wang Mian's expression was a little uneasy. He had already guessed the answer. "What's going on?" one of the divine prefecture Renhuangs asked, puzzled. Wang Mian was of a far stronger plane than Yi Futian, yet his sealing powers didn't manage to seal Yi Futian's great path of music. Some of the cultivators who had already overcome the divine tribulation instantly understood why. They looked at the skies as their expressions turned more solemn. They were able to sense part of it previously when Yi Futian and Shi Qiao battled, but they didn't think that Wang Mian would meet the same results. What did this mean? This meant that while Wang Mian's dominion sealed the physical space in the area, it didn't seal Yi Futian's dominion, which meant that all of them were still within Yi Futian's dominion of music. Yi Futian's boundary wheel was even more powerful than Wang Mian. So powerful that Wang Mian and the others didn't even realize that they were still within the region set by Yi Futian. It seemed that the only way to break through Hua Jiu's defense was with brute force, after which they could squash Yi Futian so he would be unable to keep playing the divine requiem. Wang Mian reached out. Instantly, the countless runes within the divine walls of the void seal pulsated, twisted, and turned, and streamed out with magnificent divine light. Numerous golden spears formed on the divine walls, all of which were pointed at Yi Futian. Each of the spears was imbued with the will of the indestructible. Behind the spears were matrices which induced the proliferation of this power, which only got stronger and stronger. That moment, it seemed as if there was an unending array of matrices revolving on the divine walls of the hexagonal sealed space, as an uncountable number of golden spears pointed toward where Yi Futian was. Kill! Wang Mian's voice sounded. Dragging on this battle would be disadvantageous to them. As his voice echoed in the air, one after another divine light ray erupted inside the sealed space, and the golden spears were launched at an immense speed, cutting across the void and bolting towards Yi Futian. The spears were so fast that the naked eye could only see beams of golden light. As Hua Jiu's gaze swept across the world around her, within a split second, countless afterimages poured out from her. At that moment, it was as though the entire void in the area was in a state of absolute stillness. Her immense telekinetic powers controlled the operations of the worldly great path within the area, its power far exceeding what she had released previously. The golden light beams that emitted magnificent gleams before reappeared and formed back into spears. Their speed slowed as it became difficult to move under Hua Jiu's absolute control. It seemed that everything in this sealed space was under her command. Wang Mian's palm slammed forward as the divine golden lights from his iris glowed brighter. A supreme force flowed into the divine walls and accelerated the revolution of the matrices to spit out even more golden spears. Boom! As the divine lights shot out, terrifying forces erupted and launched toward Yi Futian and Hua Jiu. Jiu, lend me a hand! Yi Futian's voice sounded in Hua Jiu's head with musical notes that seeped into her consciousness. Hua Jiu instantly understood Yi Futian's intention. Hua Jiu had absolute trust in him and wouldn't resist anything that he asked of her. She let down all of her defenses and let Yi Futian enter. Quickly, she felt like something was happening. Their spiritual energies seemed to be resonating. It was as if Yi Futian was sharing with her every bit of his existence. Strands of phantasmagorical lights shrouded the two of them. Hua Jiu's cultivation method was already unique, making it easy for her to coordinate with Yi Futian. The two of them entered a strange yet marvelous state. They could both sense everything about each other, and they could even use each other's power. This feeling was otherworldly. It was as though if Hua Ji willed it, she could play the divine requiem as well. Their consciousnesses were completely interconnected. Yi Futian and Hua Ji were close together. One of them sat in a cross-legged stance, while the other stood up. As divine lights surrounded them, it was as though the two of them merged into one. Their consciousnesses were interconnected, and their telekinetic powers fused together. They were able to sense every fragment of each other's being. When Shanin the Great composed this otherworldly piece titled The Divine Requiem, he was crowned as the greatest musician of his era. It wouldn't be difficult to imagine the level of music which he had attained. He had composed countless Guqin pieces throughout his life, and every single one could be considered a masterpiece. They may not even be much weaker than the Divine Requiem. However, the Divine Requiem was too unique. When the Divine Requiem was played, all of the world experienced grief, which was why it was considered a divine melody. Now, under the background of the Divine Requiem, Yi Futian played another piece, Hearts as One. The piece Yi Futian played at the Lost Clan to cause a metamorphosis of the battle matrix of the rocks actually had the same core idea as this piece. In fact, that piece had been a variation of Hearts as One. This Guqin piece was composed by Shanin the Great when he was together with the love of his life. They had shared everything, including their own cultivation and thoughts. Anyone could see how deeply in love they were. Their love was so deep that when his one true love passed on, Shanin the Great composed the Divine Requiem. An even more terrifying storm of music erupted in an instant. The divine consciousness gushing out of Yi Futian became more powerful. The power of the great path which he commanded surged, and every note that pulsated out from him contained deeper and deeper artistic conception. Whether it was the four great cultivators or the cultivators from the divine prefecture, they all felt the Guqin sounds getting stronger. And so did Yi Futian. As Wang Mian felt everything inside the sealed space, his gaze became sharper and his pupils constricted. Yi Futian could actually borrow cultivation from someone else. Although he had heard of it before, such techniques were extremely rare and always had some cost. There was indeed a cost to Yi Futian and Hua Jiu's fusion. Yi Futian must be able to bear the burden of Hua Jiu's telekinetic powers, and Hua Jiu must be able to completely open up to him and have absolute trust in him. Otherwise, there would be severe backlash for using the technique. In essence, this was equivalent to Hua Jiu handing her life over to Yi Futian. Even if someone did succeed in practicing a cultivation method like this, very few would be able to commit to it at such a level. I see. So this is Jiu's cultivation method. Yi Futian felt happy for Hua Jiu after sensing her consciousness. He knew Jiu would run into great opportunities cultivating in the divine prefecture. As the sounds of the Guqin shrouded the skies and the earth, it was as if everything was under Yi Futian's control within this sealed space. Golden spears, which emitted magnificent divine lights, continued to blast down from above. Yet, as Yi Futian's fingers ran over the Guqin and melodies strummed out, the golden spears crumbled one by one, exploding in the air. Within his vast dominion, everything was destroyed. With one thought, all of the spears were obliterated. With his palms still on the divine wall, Wang Mian's pupils constricted as he saw the scene before him. His golden iris looked toward Yi Futian's figure inside the sealed space. He sensed his surging aura. It seemed as though Hua Jiu and Yi Futian had merged into one. They were indistinct from each other. Their wills resonated, and their powers fused together. With one strum of the Guqin, all of his attacks were annihilated. Only the combined power of both of their telekinesis could do something like this. Magnificent divine lights continued to shine on the divine wall. The patterns on them formed into matrices as if brewing new attacks. But as Yi Futian hands strummed the divine Guqin, one note after another pulsated out, under the will of grief of the divine Requiem. These notes were imbued with powers that could destroy great paths, causing the patterns on the divine walls to burst, destroying the flawless matrices inside the sealed space. Boom, boom, boom. Gaps started to appear in the divine wall due to the blast of the explosions, and the size of these gaps increased continuously. Gradually, it was as though the entire space was collapsing as the vast divine wall disintegrated. Yi Futian, Hua Jiu, and Yu Sheng's figures appeared before the cultivators once again. However, the auras on Yi Futian and Hua Jiu were no longer the same as before. They were almost indistinct from each other. Shrouded by divine lights encircling them, the two seemed like a godly couple. Not bad. Wang Mian said as he looked toward the two. He took one step forward as his aura surged. His expression became more solemn as he sensed that the will of the divine requiem was getting stronger, and it was swaying his emotions. Various imageries and scenes were starting to play back in his mind to waver his determination and weaken it. If his determination was influenced and his emotions were controlled by someone else, then his powers would be weakened. Letting this continue would be disadvantageous to them. The other three of the four great cultivators realized this as well. They could sense that the endless celestial skies and the lands that extended beyond the horizon were all shrouded in a formless storm of music. It was everywhere. The terrifying sound pulses were still invading their minds at an alarming rate. "It's time," Wang Mian said. Hua Zhenmo from the Haotian clan, Pei Sheng from the Infinite Mountains, and Jiang Qingfeng from the Jiang Ancient God clan all nodded. Their gazes locked in the direction Yi Futian was in. Divine lights encircled them, and astounding auras erupted from them. At this moment, the four great ninth plane Renhuang cultivators finally got serious and were ready to attack simultaneously. Previously, they all looked down on their opponents to some degree, but now Yi Futian and Hua Jiu's fusion of powers made them sense critical danger. Sounds of the great path started resonating through the world as the projection of an ancient god appeared behind Hua Zhenmo. It was as if Haotian the Great had descended upon the world, dominating all who stood before him. He looked down onto the battlefield as his body produced a supremely overbearing aura. Boom! As Hua Zhenmo raised his hand, the godlike figure exerted a force of assault. From up in the void to all the way down, a cosmic Haotian seal engulfing the skies appeared, blocking all celestial skies that the three could see. There was nowhere to run. With a thought, Pei Sheng summoned countless phantasms which filled the entire area. Each one of them seemed to be a manifestation of him. As his true self waved his palm, all of the nearly infinite phantasms attacked, wielding their divine swords and dashing towards the three with killing intent, blocking out all possible escape routes. Jiang Qingfeng stomped on the void. His figure appeared atop the three, summoning a terrifying storm of space, ravaging the area. Behind Wang Mian, a colossal golden pattern appeared. This pattern rapidly expanded towards the skies, shrouding the skies and blocking out the sun. With terrifying booms, it was as though the worldly great path was smelted into the pattern, creating a petrifying black hole that swallowed all great path powers. Countless divine lights were reeled into it as the entire area turned into an apocalyptic region of obliteration. Anything that got close would be turned into ash and dust. Boom! Crack! A horrifying noise sounded. The force of the storm descended downward to shroud the vast space below. Within the gold-edged tornado storm, a magnificently shining divine spear rose. It looked like a true divine weapon, pulsating and emitting divine lights that spanned thousands of miles. As the spear smote down from the celestial skies, it caused a terrifying gash to appear, stretching from the skies to the ground. Chapter 2379, The Exchange. The sound of Guqin sounded even more urgent under Yi Futian's fingers. What came with the sound of Guqin was the suffocating coercion that filled this vast space presently. It was as if the great path between heaven and earth was about to solidify, and even time and space were about to come to a standstill. In this oppressive space, the attacks from the other four cultivators did not stop, but continued to press forward against them. Haotian Midra came slamming down, completely covering this corner of the sky. Every note Yi Futian was playing exploded as they came in contact with the Haotian Midra. However, the Midra, as released by Hua Zhenmo, was far too terrifying. It was as if that phantom of Haotian the Great had pressed down from above the sky, destroying everything that was in its path. Likewise, an imperial shadow appeared behind Yi Futian with tremendous horror. Stars encircled the surrounding space as infinite beams of starlight shot out, and all the heavenly bodies were unified. Under the sound of the guqin, countless stars blasted toward the Futian Midra, hitting their mark again and again so that the Futian Midra trembled continuously. At the same time, with Yi Futian in the center, all the stars in this world spread out everywhere. So it was as if Yi Futian and his companions were inside a real starry sky world. The many attacking divine swords were being blocked by the stars, and whenever they penetrated through those interfering stars and zoomed in on Yi Futian, they were destroyed by the hopping musical notes. Boom! The space-destroying storm released by Jiang Qingfeng traversed the void and came at them as if it could pass over their defenses and transform into a power akin to divine tribulation. It went in the direction where Yi Futian was without the slightest hesitation. As for the golden divine spear released by Wang Nian, as soon as that divine spear bloomed, cracks appeared in the void, and the stars that were guarding in front of him shattered and were pulverized. The momentum of that long spear was unstoppable as it continued to puff out infinite divine light. The power of the joint attacks from these four top figures was frightening, and this world seemed to be on the verge of breaking apart. The scenes that played out before them were apocalyptic. The sound from the guqin suddenly changed, and the space of the great path began to flow in reverse, as infinite sword was circulated between heaven and earth. Yi Futian's sleeves fluttered, and the notes he played exploded with sharp and piercing sounds as the sound of sword chiming resounded throughout the void. Countless divine swords whizzed out, carrying the divine light, and collided with that light of catastrophe. At the same time, a powerful divine sword appeared between heaven and earth. When this sword manifested, a storm made of countercurrents appeared in the void. Song of the Lost Divine. Everyone from the divine prefecture was greatly stunned. This was yet another divine melody. No one expected Yi Futian to have evolved to such an advanced degree and could use the skills freely and at will. With just a single turning of his mind, he readily and seamlessly switched between musical pieces. Lord Taishian watched the development in the sky below and was deeply moved. It was by chance that Yi Futian came to cultivate the song of the lost divine, and it was a purely fortuitous happenstance. It was with the song of the lost divine that he was able to break the shackles of Renhuang. But now, Yi Futian's accomplishment in this composition had surpassed his countless years of hard work. Perhaps this was a testament to Yi Futian's natural talent. The song of the lost divine was the lost sound of the great path. As the great path collapsed, the space was distorted and flowed in reverse. The offensive power that had been stymied seemed to be hindered yet again. And the golden divine spear that came in for the kill slowed down a bit as well. Soon after, the great path started to flow back with the countercurrent. It was as if time was moving in reverse. A sword came in to attack, carrying a terrifying power with it. It was none other than the fleeting divine sword that collided harshly with the golden divine spear. The moment the two collided, a terrifying divine light pierced through the space, as if it could slaughter all the Renhuang in this space with that light alone. The dazzling light beam blinded many Renhuang observing the fight, and it made it impossible for them to open their eyes. Many cultivators in the Heavenly Mandate City felt a sharp pain in their eyes which caused them to shut their eyes tightly. Above the firmament, the two forces collapsed and destroyed each other at the same time. The divine spear and the divine sword disappeared together. Watching the battlefield above the firmament, the hearts of all the cultivators quivered. Just with the sound of the guqin alone, they had effectively blocked the coordinated attacks from these four great cultivators. It seemed that when Yi Futian played the divine guqin with Huajiu's power, he could exert far greater strength than on his own. "Jiu, why don't you come and play the divine requiem?" Yi Futian said to Huajiu, who was next to him. "Sure." Jiu consented with a slight nod. She sat down cross-legged beside Yi Futian. As Yi Futian gave a little wave of his hand, the divine guqin yearning appeared in front of Huajiu. She was the daughter of Yi Futian's first teacher, Hua Fenglu. She had been playing guqin since she was a young girl. Although she had not continued to pursue it and couldn't be considered an expert, she did understand the concept of rhythm. But at this moment in time, she and Yi Futian shared one mind, and she didn't need to be an expert. All she needed was their mutual understanding. Whatever she was playing was, in fact, what Yi Futian was playing in his heart. Even more so, it was with the help of divine guqin yearning, which had been transformed by Shenin the Great himself. The guqin itself already embodied the feeling of extreme sadness. When Hua Jiu plucked the strings, she seemed to be immersed completely in that sorrowful mood. She was in perfect sync with the musical meaning of the composition. The atmosphere previously created by the divine requiem was still lingering in the space, having never disappeared. When Hua Jiu started to play, she was merely sustaining the sorrow expressed by the music. How sad! All the cultivators from the divine prefecture, who were watching on the sideline, couldn't help but lament when they heard this music. Hua Jiu's performance of the divine requiem was similar in feeling to Yi Futian's performance, but the sadness she expressed was of a different kind. The magnitude of the tragedy that Hua Jiu had to endure personally, compared to Yi Futian, was perhaps on an even grander scale. After all, as a woman, she had been taken away by her family and forbidden to continue her relationship with Yi Futian. She had used death as a way to prove her faithfulness, and she had also protected others with her life. She had lost her memory once and became someone else. All that she had experienced was full of endless desolation. Moreover, today's Hua Jiu had lived through countless lifetimes and experienced too much sorrow. In the brief moment that she had been playing the divine requiem, there were already tears in the corner of her eyes. Yi Futian did not stop just because Hua Jiu was playing the guqin. He raised his hand and reached out. The great path was the string of an instrument made from heaven and earth. Guqin spirit had always been part of Yi Futian's life spirit, imbued with the rhythm, and Sound of the Hearts linked him to Hua Jiu, making them one. Yi Futian's gaze swept across the void, perceiving everything between heaven and earth. Hua Jiu was playing the divine requiem as controlled by him. At the same time, he was perceiving Jiu's unique abilities. When he closed his eyes, it was as if everything in this world was under his command, and he could perceive everything in this world as they were all under his power of telekinesis. It seemed that he could even see into the spiritual souls of the four great cultivators, perceiving the existence of the souls inside their bodies. What? The eyes of the four major cultivators showed a slight alarm as they sensed that something was amiss. In this instance, they could feel that someone was stalking their spiritual souls, which was, in itself, an incredibly uncomfortable sensation. It was as if they were being spied upon. There was no privacy to speak of. In the void, Yi Futian's raised a finger. It lightly trembled as if he had plucked the strings of the great path. At that moment, everyone felt their heartstrings trembled as well. It was as their spiritual souls had been shaken. Although it was very slight, it was the most uncomfortable feeling. A strange situation now transpired on the battlefield. Under Yi Futian and Hua Jiu's joint efforts, the battle seemed to have stalled. Yu Sheng had not yet made any moves, and these four cultivators were already in trouble. They seemed to find themselves in an extremely embarrassing situation. Not only were they unable to break through the defense of their opponents, but the sound of the guqin also had a noticeable effect on their diminishing combat effectiveness. If Yi Futian's performance of the divine requiem before was not enough to threaten them, it was because his realm was lower. But now, it was Hua Jiu who was playing with her powerful mind. Hers was connected with Yi Futian's, so that she could express the mood of the divine requiem perfectly. Not to mention Yi Futian gave her the divine guqin yearning to play. The atmosphere was so charged that in just a few short moments, the vast and endless void seemed to be shrouded in desolation. The cultivators of the heavenly mandate city below, who had been watching the battle in the sky, now found an unimaginable sense of sadness in their hearts. Across the endless void, the sound of Guqin softly blanketed the land below and entered the heavenly mandate city. Although the strength of the rhythm that reached the city was on the weaker side, it could still cause countless cultivators to fall into that sorrowful spirit until many of them began to cry uncontrollably. And in the middle of the battlefield, these 4 cultivators from the ancient god clan, who were already affected by the mood transmitted by the Guqin, were now under unimaginable pressure. When they were attacked by Yi Futian before, their emotions had inevitably altered. A myriad of imageries began to appear in their minds, and gradually their mentalities were held hostage by their emotions. There was a sense of grief that came from the bottom of their hearts. This sense of grief seemed to originate from inside out, from their hearts and their spiritual souls. They involuntarily thought of memories that had long been hidden in their pasts. They could clearly feel that their grip over the great path in the surrounding heaven and earth was weakening. Yi Futian could see the changes taking place on these cultivators, and he knew very well how powerful was the divine requiem. Although this power was invisible and its destruction could not really be detected outright, Hua Ji's telekinesis prowess, coupled with divine Guqin, was more than enough to trap all of them with no turning back. It was only a matter of time. Yi Futian's outstretched hand was moving continuously, caressing the invisible strings, until each beating note hit the soul directly, causing the listeners' spiritual souls to quiver. Although it was not enough to injure the others, it was chipping away at their will little by little until they finally collapsed and surrendered to that despair. They walked forward, and an even more terrifying aura bloomed from them. Under the lingering divine light, the shadow of Haoqian the Great behind Hua Zhenmo pressed down again, blasting out an apocalyptic Haoqian Midra. Nonetheless, cultivators from the divine prefecture could feel something was not quite right. Hua Zhenmo seemed to be affected, someone whispered. Well, no one is exempt from the effects of the divine requiem. This Haoqian Midra was unleashed little too prematurely and does not have the momentum it did before. The discernment of these top figures was extremely astute, and they could calculate the power of the attack in a single glance, discerning the level and mental state of the person who released the attack. Yi Futian was unmoved. As the strings were plucked, mighty sword was gathering as numerous divine swords rushing up against the momentum, hitting the Midra in the midst of that terrifying storm. Horrific rumbling sounds were heard as the Midra oscillated, bursting little by little until the swords had turned into a storm, stabbing madly until the Haoqian Midra was pierced, then completely exploded. Hua Jiu focused her attention on the divine requiem while Yi Futian was conducting a series of guerrilla warfare at will. The two cooperated so perfectly that it seemed that the 4 top figures from the divine prefecture could only react passively. The combination of the divine Guqin and the divine requiem is truly powerful. This Guqin is the relic of Shinin the Great, integrated with the soul of the great emperor. I guess it can be regarded as divine weaponry from the great emperor, said Wang Mian. He then looked at the other 3. If this is really the best you can do, I am afraid we won't be seeing anything. More likely, we will all be defeated here and now by the sound of the Guqin. Hua, Zhenmo, Pei Sheng, and Jiang Qingfeng were clearly aware of the point he was making. They looked at the couple playing the Guqin and saw Yi Futian's silver hair dancing in the wind, while Hua Jiu sat cross-legged, playing meticulously. If this were not a battlefield, it would be a most beautiful scene to behold, just like a painting. Boom! Rays of divine light shrouded and drowning them. In their eyes, a certain transformation was happening again. Their strengths were still climbing. The aura from each of the 4 cultivators was becoming more frightening, and their willpower was getting more aggressive, resisting the will of the divine requiem. Are they going to release their aces before the real battle? Someone whispered in amazement. It's not that they don't want to fight a decisive battle. It's just that under the sound of the guqin, they are all greatly affected. Even if they fight, they will be under someone else's control. The weakening of their own grasp over the great path is fatal. They can't break down Yi Futian's defense, and for them to continue being submerged in this mood, it will only get worse, so that their hands are forced. With the buttress from the divine power, they will invariably become stronger. Instead of being consumed by this tug-of-war and gradually falling into disadvantage, it is better to go all out and fight. Many people saw the situation clearly. If these four continued to fight against Yi Futian under such conditions, eventually their strength would be weakened. It would affect the outcome of the battle, thus weakening their positions. Under the halo of the divine power, Hua Zhenmo was undergoing a certain transformation. The face of a deity appeared above the firmament as Hua Zhenmo's figure left in a flash and levitated into the air. Strands of horrific aura penetrated through his body. It was as this force was becoming stronger, Hua Zhenmo himself seemed to have turned into a god. It seemed as if he was the incarnation of Haotian the Great, descending into the world, oppressing this corner of the sky with all his might. Soon, Pei Sheng of Infinite Mountains and Jiang Qingfeng of the ancient royal family of Jiang also underwent some transformation. Under the lingering divine light, each one of them was like some kind of deity. Wang Mian floated high into the sky. The golden divine light enveloped the boundless void. Then, the light released from his body seemed to swallow up the infinite power between heaven and earth. As he waved his hand in the air, a piercing divine glory appeared inside his palm, and a golden divine spear manifested. It seemed to be the sharpest divine weapon in the world, but the entire great path of this space seemed to be refined by it as well. At this time, above Wang Mian, many stormy matrices were gestating above the firmament. Boom! Golden light of destruction came down as a series of terrible cracks appeared in the space. It was no longer the same attack he unleashed previously. There was a great difference in the strength of the two attacks. It's not too late to hand over the corpse of Shenjia, the great emperor. I can still let you go. Wang Mian lowered his head to look at Yi Futian, who was down below. His tone still carried an icy arrogance, as if he was the final arbiter of this world. But Yi Futian smiled sarcastically and retorted, "But am I not the one who has whatever it is that you want?" At the same time, when Yu Sheng saw the cultivators in the void, an astonishing demonic might erupted from him. Then a divine item flew out from him, and in an instant that monstrous demonic will rushed straight into the sky. Chapter 2381, Mighty Battle. What monster? Everyone looked towards Yu Sheng. Inside the area surrounded by demonic might, Yu Sheng had donned a magnificent demonic armor, and a terrifying will of the demonic god erupted from within. Throughout the vast lands and skies, demonic might surged and roared like rolling thunder. In the void, a pair of dark, cold eyes appeared, petrifying all who dared to look at it. Demonic male. The cultivator's pupils constricted as they looked toward Yu Sheng. Who was this guy? The demonic male is a gear of the demonic gods, a true divine item. As Yu Sheng donned the demonic male, all of the cultivators wondered how terrifying his power would now be. As terrifying booming noises sounded, a demonic projection appeared behind Yu Sheng, towering over the world like a demonic god. As the projection shrouded Yu Sheng's body, it fused together with the demonic might surrounding him, as though evolving into a true demonic god. Likewise, a divine item appeared before Yi Futian, along with a terrifying aura that erupted from it. As Shenjia, the great emperor's body, was summoned, Yi Futian's spiritual soul detached from his body. Divine lights encircled Shenjia, the great emperor's body, before his spiritual soul gushed into it. Immediately, Shenjia, the great emperor's body, twitched, and by the time he raised his head, the horrific divine lights from his eyes made the hearts of anyone who witnessed it tremble. Are they all releasing divine items now? The cultivators' hearts pounded. In the battle just now, the four great cultivators were hampered by the sound of the Yi, Futian's guqin. They had been unable to wield their full powers. To counter that, they all released their strongest weapons, the divine items. It was equivalent to going through a metamorphosis. They were already peak-level Renhuang plane, and now they were even more powerful. It was an unequal battle to begin with, but now that they had equipped themselves with divine items, how could the battle continue? So Yi Futian and Yu Xing no longer held back, and both drew their divine items as well. As Hua Jiu familiarized herself with yearning, the divine guqin, the emotions in the divine requiem were growing stronger. Even as the four great cultivators drew their divine items, the will of grief continued to infiltrate their minds and corrode their determination. They could only temporarily subdue it with divine powers. Kill! The four stopped waiting. As Wang Mian voiced something, rays of divine light that obliterated everything in its way streamed out of the golden matrix, conjuring atop his head. It was as though the divine lights rained judgment on the worlds, attempting to rain destruction upon where Yi Futian and Huaji were. Boom! A figure descended from the skies. It was like a demonic god had arrived, coming to a stop in the air above Yi Futian. It was Yu Sheng. His gaze swept across the skies high above him. Both of his eyes contained such dominating aura, it was as though anyone who saw it would lower their heads and surrender at once. It was simply unparalleled. Many demonic projections appeared in the skies as though the demonic gods of the worlds had descended. Every single one had a terrifying aura. All of them were summoned by Yu Shang. As the divine lights rained down to obliterate all living beings in their way, many of the demonic projections were crushed and destroyed, turning into dust and ash within an instant as they were unable to fend against the horrific divine lights shooting down from the matrix. "Leave me," Yi Futian said as he raised his head to glance at where Yu Shang was. Of course, he understood that Yu Shang intended to protect Hua Jiu and him, but he didn't need it. While Yi Futian's physical body continued to sit quietly beside Hua Jiu, the body of Xinjia, the great emperor, moved. Yi Futian saw that horrific beam of light was blasting toward them. So with one thought, countless divine lights shot out from Xinjia, the great emperor's body, akin to mythic runes being summoned one after another. Pointing his finger ahead, countless divine lights converged instantly to form a light screen of space. All of the attacks landed on the luminous wall, yet weren't able to break it. It was as though with a casual point of his finger, Yi Futian had created a world to block the attacks for him. Just then, the divine weapon in Wang Mian's possession struck down, the golden divine spear hitting the light screen of space. A deep, muffled thump echoed the battlefield as the light screen shattered. The golden divine spear had actually managed to pierce it. The terrifying divine lights from the spear continued the smite downward, intending to kill Yi Futian once and for all. A light screen of obliteration engulfed the entire space, blinding anyone who witnessed it. Xinjia, the great emperor's body, flew straight up. He neither dodged nor evaded, flying directly up into the skies like a beam of light as the divine lights on him shone magnificently. He raised his hand and pointed towards the divine spear ahead as his entire body turned into a supreme divine sword, colliding with the divine light that was moving down. As the two rays of light met, terrifying gashes appeared in the space around them. "Break!" Xinjia, the great emperor, yelled. Instantly, his sword will destroyed everything in its way as his divine frame moved with unstoppable force. Wang Mian's expression turned more solemn. All of the divine lights from his worldly matrices converged onto him as if all the divine lights of the worlds had merged into one to fuse into his palm. He once again thrust the divine spear, directly colliding with Yi Futian. The body of Xinjia, the great emperor, was like an unbreakable divine sword. As it collided with the golden divine spear, two force waves erupted from the collision. the great paths around them starting crumbling uncontrollably as they were destroyed by the shock waves. "Path obliteration!" called Xinjia the Great Emperor. Instantly, divine lights erupted from his body, shooting out towards the matrix patterns atop the skies. Horrifying divine lights of the sword pierced the matrix patterns, causing them to shatter one after another. An equally powerful force was exerted onto Wang Mian. He let out a muffled groan as his body was blasted into the air. Seeing this scene before them shook the divine prefecture cultivators to their core. They had heard before that Yi Futian could unleash extreme combat prowess with the body of Xinjia the Great Emperor. Now, they could confirm that it was no mere rumor. Wang Mian himself was an ultra-powerful Renhuang. He was peak-level Renhuang plane and even wielding a divine weapon, yet he was still repelled by Yi Futian. Wang Mian's arm trembled. He looked at the quivering golden spear on his arm. So this was the power of path obliteration of Xinjia the Great Emperor. When they clashed just now, it was as though his path was getting destroyed. In the meantime, in the other direction, the other high-level cultivators didn't just watch. Hua Zhenmo transformed into Haotian the Great and exerted his dominating might. Great palm seals appeared and moved down, covering such a vast space that it was as if it shrouded the entire world. As huge explosions echoed the air, these palm seals slammed down on Yi Futian's physical body and on Huajiu. Letting his spiritual soul leave his body to control Xinjia the Great Emperor's body was extremely risky. If Yi Futian's own body were attacked and destroyed, his spiritual soul would have no physical vessel to reside in. Hua Jiu's Guqin continued to irk and influence them. Yu Sheng looked high up above the skies. Boom! His body was still expanding exponentially, transforming into a colossal demonic god. Countless demonic projections around them guarded Yi Futian and Huajiu, while the demonic god he had transformed into raised his hand to slam down on the celestial skies. Supreme demonic might flared the world as his palm collided with the Haotian Great Palm Seal. The world once again felt like it was falling apart. Great paths collapsed, and dark gashes in space swallowed everything that came close. The force was so great that even the heavenly mandate city below the skies shook. The entire body of the demonic god shined magnificently. Demonic lights flowed and turned throughout him, giving rise to unparalleled power. Instantly, violent blasts and explosions erupted from the collision, and the great palm seal started exploding from the middle as cracks started appearing. As the cracks sprawled out, the great palm seal collapsed uncontrollably. Chapter 2382 Heaven Tempering Divine Method. He's strong. The cultivators' hearts pounded as they witnessed Yu Sheng's attack. After he had donned the demonic mail, Yu Sheng's aura evolved. It was as though he was possessed by a demonic god. Legend had it that the demonic mail was forged from the will of a demonic god, which is why it contained the soul of the demonic god and was owned by generations of devil emperors. Now, Yu Sheng owned a demonic mail set, which told of his status in the devil world. Could it be that the devil emperor saw him as the heir of the devil throne? If that was the case, then this person before them could be a future devil emperor, which was an incredibly noble status. As Hua Zhenmo's Haotian seal was crushed, the eyes of the figure that stood in the void, towering above worlds, turned cold. He had now transformed into Haotian, yet he still wasn't able to quash Yu Sheng. Boom! Horrifying, deafening noises echoed the air as rays of divine lights shot out. The supreme might of Haotian reigned over the land as if it were exerted by all worlds combined. A deep thump sounded as a celestial divine seal smote down. Countless giant palm seals fell all across the land, each of them containing terrifying divine lights. The seals engulfed the world as if they were crushing and destroying everything. This attack covered every inch of the battlefield. Even the other cultivators had to retreat to avoid being hit. The attack came straight for Yu Sheng. The cultivators only saw shock waves rippling from the skies. The whole thing was akin to the sounds of the demonic god. Centering around him, countless projections of demonic gods spawned, encircling the colossal demonic god which he had transformed into. As a demonic blade coiled by horrifying demonic will appeared in Yu Sheng's hand, harrowing demonic might surged and roared. It seemed that the projections of the demonic gods of the worlds resonated and synced as they simultaneously raised their demonic blades. Infinite demonic lights converged into Yu Sheng's demonic blade, causing it to expand. Demonic god wielded the blade with both hands and slashed out, splitting the skies. In an instant, the countless projections of the demonic gods struck out with their demonic blades in perfect synchronization to collide with the falling Futian Great Palm Seal. At the same time, their demonic wills converged onto the demonic blade at the center. Tens of thousands of demons resonated as the demonic gods of the worlds attacked as one. When the blade slashed forward, an endlessly large demonic god projection appeared atop the celestial skies. This projection slashed out demonic light as well, which fused into the demonic blade and cleaved the skies. At this instant, terrifying cracks appeared throughout the world, from below the skies to all the way up high. Everywhere it passed, the great palm seals were torn into fragments. Finally, the blade struck the sky-shrouding Futian Great Palm Seal. As terrifying lights of obliteration erupted, the palm seal was torn apart by the dark storm of demon blades. With a flare of horrifying demonic lights, the divine seal was destroyed and split in half. Even more terrifyingly, the demonic light continued to move upwards, splitting up the skies and hacking apart the projection of Futian. It was as if the sky was split in half, causing a fault line to appear. Futian the Great's projection seemed to be split open as well, and only the demonic light and the crack spanning the skies remained. All of the cultivators' gazes turned toward that slash in the celestial skies. Their hearts pounded as they witnessed what was happening. At this moment, it was as if the entire space had gone silent and everything was frozen in time. Suddenly, atop the celestial skies, bits of blood dripped down, caught by the eyes of the cultivators. It seemed that Futian was bleeding. With the eruption of a divine light, Futian the Great's projection disintegrated and dissipated into the air. A figure appeared atop the celestial skies. It was Hua Zhenmo. But now, a wound appeared on his forehead. His aura became exceedingly frail, and his face was pale. Obviously, he was severely wounded and had to retreat from the battle. One slash. The hearts of the cultivators pounded as they looked toward the demonic god projection formed by Yu Sheng. Was this really that seventh plan demonic cultivator they had seen before? Equipped with the demonic mail, he had become so powerful and dominating. His blade cleaved the celestial skies, directly opening it up. Even now, the crack was still present in the air, and storms of obliteration continued to seep out from the dark cracks in space. The current Devil Emperor that reigned over the Devil world had dominated it many years ago. He was known as an unmatched genius, creating several demonic arts on his own. Some say that amongst all of the great emperors today, the Devil Emperor was likely the one who could wield the most legendary techniques. In the generation after him, likely only Donghuang the Great, another unparalleled genius, could compare to him. Now, it seemed that Yu Sheng had inherited quite a few powers from the Devil Emperor. This scene also shocked the other three great cultivators. At their level, it was very difficult for them to attack at the same time, as one person's attack would occupy the entire battlefield and leave no space for anybody else. If they did attack simultaneously, the attacks would collide and interfere with one another. Their cultivation levels were simply too powerful, and their attack range too wide, leaving them no choice but to take turns. But Yu Sheng wounded Hua Zhenmo with just one slash, which led to the other three cultivators reassessing Yu Sheng's level. Then there was Yi Futian, who blocked Wang Mian's attack using the body of Xinjia, the great emperor. He clearly hadn't used his full power. While Huaji was playing the divine requiem on the side, in actuality she too was remarkably powerful. The battle was now 3-on-3, and the differences between their planes seemed to be neglectable. At this point, Wang Mian and the two other ancient god clan cultivators seemed to have no advantage over Yi Futian's group whatsoever. After Hua Zhenmo was gravely wounded, Pei Sheng and Jiang Qingfeng stopped attacking rashly. The three powerful cultivators stood atop the skies, looking down upon Yi Futian, Yu Sheng, and Hua Jiu. Yi Futian and Yu Sheng each took a different position. Between them was Hua Jiu, on the ground, still peacefully playing the guqin. As the guqin continued to sound, the will of grief of the divine requiem grew stronger. Actually, with the current 6 cultivators remaining, Hua Jiu could engage in battle without playing the divine requiem. The body of Xinjia the Great is right here. Come get it! A voice came out from inside Xinjia the Great's body. It was speaking to Wang Mian, who stood atop the void. Since the beginning, Wang Mina wanted Yi Futian to hand over the divine frame of Xinjia the Great, and he even had the audacity to say that he would give Yi Futian a chance. Now, as Yi Futian's spiritual soul had entered the body of Xinjia the Great for the battle, even if it would create a huge burden for him, he had to make Wang Mian pay the price. Hearing Yi Futian's words, Wang Mian's gaze turned into an extremely sharp blade as he once again raised the golden spear. But this time his iris morphed into something different. They were no longer his own eyes, but turned into a pair of divine eyes. As Yi Futian raised his head to look toward Wang Mian, a supreme force erupted from Wang Mian's body. Just like before, matrices appeared one after another atop the celestial skies. But this time their auras were even more terrifying and powerful. Divine lights flew out from Wang Mian and merged with the matrices. Then Wang Mian raised his arm to point at the skies. His petrifying divine gaze looked toward the skies as well. The matrices intertwined and intersected as they started to fuse together, transforming into an endlessly huge pattern, swallowing all of the great path powers of the worlds. As these horrific patterns appeared, all of the powers in the vast space were reeled within. They assimilated to make it stronger, eventually forming a terrifying, sky-smelting whirlpool of divine powers. All of the high-level divine prefecture cultivators' hearts pounded as they witnessed the scene above them. That was Tianyan the Great's heaven-tempering divine method. Chapter 2383. The Decisive Strike. Yi Futian looked up into the sky. With the support he derived from the divine power, the firmament turned into a divine matrix. Countless divine lights wove together, tempering the power of the great path in the heavens, merging into a divine matrix. In the vast and boundless space, divine lights shot down as sizzling was heard. Those cultivators from the divine prefecture, who were below, wore a serious and heavy expression as they released the defensive power of the great path to block the divine light that came down on them. The heaven-tempering divine method tempers the power of the great path in the heavens and turns it into a divine matrix. Its power is enough to slay all enemies. The cultivators from divine prefecture secretly marveled. The heaven-tempering divine method had been created by Tianyan the Great. It could be used to cast matrices, weapon-making, as well as kill others. In weapon-making, it was capable of the most powerful matrices, and in killing, it was also capable of the most horrific offensive techniques. Any areas covered by this divine method would be annihilated. According to legend, Tianyan the Great created the heaven-tempering divine method when he was still at his peak. Its power was enough to shroud an entire space until the entire world was covered entirely. With a single thought, everyone in a realm could be slaughtered instantaneously. Its prowess was most dreadful. And now, Wang Mian was releasing the heaven-tempering divine method. Clearly, its power would be no match to the one released by Tianyan the Great back then, but the power it was able to exert was plenty terrifying. He stood under the heaven-tempering divine matrix, raising the golden divine spear in his hand. The divine power surged into the matrix, so that those countless rays of divine light seemed to fall with divine power as well. "Let me help you," said a voice. It was none other than Jiang Qingfeng who offered up his help to Wang Mian. "Yes." Wang Mian nodded. This heaven-tempering divine method could temper the power of the great path in the heavens. If Jiang Qingfeng was willing to cooperate with him, he could temper his power and increase the magnitude of the heaven-tempering divine method. "I'll help you too," someone else piped up. It was Pei Sheng. He walked over, and the three of them stood together under the heaven-tempering divine matrix. These two gave up their own separate attacks and urged their divine power to flow into the divine matrix. In an instant, the power of the heaven-tempering divine method seemed to multiply significantly again. The divine light that fell became even more radiant, and it appeared as if it was cutting through space. In addition, the divine light that was falling had become more pervasive until it seemed that it was covering heaven entirely. Everyone watched the heaven-tempering divine method increase in power and felt the horror that it produced. Wang Mian, Pei Sheng, and Jiang Qingfeng had finally joined forces. These three major cultivators had gathered all the power at their disposal and poured it into the heaven-tempering divine method to expand the prowess of this divine method. Presently, the heaven-tempering divine method was way more powerful than when it had been urged on by Wang Mian alone. The sound of sizzle came out with endless divine light falling. The vast spatial world was completely isolated and even divided into numerous segments that were completely separate. However, many cultivators were in this space. No matter how many people there were, they would have to withstand this attack just the same. Nobody could possibly escape the attack of this divine method. Yi Futian, Yu Sheng, and Hua Ji were standing below. They would not be able to evade this attack either. All they could do was to resist this force head-on. The cultivators from Tianyan City raised their heads to look at the battlefield up high. In this battle, none of the principalities from the divine prefecture participated. Not even when the Vajra divine child and Huajianmo were severely injured did they choose to intervene. After all, at this level, peak Renhuang realm, they could bear any consequences as a result of their own actions as long as they were not dead. For everyone, this was an extremely rare battle, regardless of the outcome. Besieged by the heaven-tempering divine method, would Yi Futian manage to withstand it with the help of Xinjia, the great emperor? And what about Yu Sheng in the demonic male? Or Hua Jiu, who was playing the Guqin? All three of them were within range of the onslaught. In that space were many phantom shadows of the demon god summoned by Yu Sheng. When the slaughtering divine light fell down, sharp piercing sounds were heard. Those phantom shadows were shredded, annihilated, and then dissipated under the countless divine light. They vanished into nothingness, leaving absolutely no trace. All around Yu Sheng lingered a terrible blade will, which turned into a light screen, shielding his body. Those incoming attacks fell on the light screen, emitting shrieking sounds, but could not tear it apart. Around Yi Futian, the same was true. A sword screen appeared, surrounding his body to shield him from the falling divine light. Meanwhile, Hua Jiu in the area below was still playing the divine melody, Yi Futian's physical body next to her. When the slaughtering light came down and approached the area where she was, an astonishing force appeared. It seemed to solidify the space. A vacuum was forming around them. At this moment, this battlefield seemed a little strange. Everyone seemed to stand there without moving, but they all understood that the situation at hand was extremely dangerous. It might be the decisive moment when a clear outcome would emerge. In the silent space, there was nothing but the slaughtering divine light that rained down upon them. The cultivators from Divine Prefecture watched quietly. They were wondering if Yi Futian and his companions could overcome this divine matrix created by the joint force of the three cultivators as they worked together. They were trying to create an expanded heaven-tempering divine method. If it could not be neutralized, it was very probable that Yi Futian's party of 3 would suffer grave injuries. Wang Mian lowered his head to glance at the 3 people below while his arm was still raised. When he looked up again at the divine matrix, his figure rushed directly into the matrix. Suddenly, a boundless and massive phantom appeared in the midst of the matrix. It was none other than Wang Mian's face. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A more horrific slaughtering light descended like the light of extinction. In an instant, deep and terrible fissures appeared below. Suddenly, golden divine light and the pitch-dark crevices interweaved, finding their murderous way to Yi Futian and his little party of 3. When this attack landed, it was as if all the heavens were about to be silenced. "Be careful!" some cultivator from the divine prefecture cautioned from below. When such a horrific attack came crashing down, even those further down were under its influence. All those who had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path were busy gathering their powerful forces to protect themselves. As strong as they were, the slightest complacency would allow this attack to breach their defense. At this moment, the heaven-tempering divine method was already the type of attack capable of slaughtering cultivators who had survived the first divine tribulation of the Great Path. Boom! At this moment, Yu Sheng took a sudden step forward. That invincible demon god appeared directly above Yi Futian. It was as if it was blocking on top of him. In case that attack came blasting down, he would be the first line of defense. A boundless and massive demon god appeared, standing tall between heaven and earth. Numerous phantoms of the demon gods filled the sky again, but this time they were illusions only. However, all these phantoms resonated solemnly as if responding to the call of the demonic lord. All around Yu Sheng, actual figures of the demon gods appeared. It was as if they were superimposed over his body. They simultaneously unleashed their demonic blades as well. They slashed toward the firmament at the same time when Yu Sheng himself also unleashed the strike. All these incomparably powerful attacks gathered together, turning into one blade, slashing towards the upper sky. Yu Sheng's body moved with the light of the blade, trailing upward. When Yi Futian looked up and saw this, he understood what Yu Sheng was trying to accomplish. The demonic blade traversed the sky down, moving to the bottom. It split open the space and aimed at Wang Mian. Wang Mian had already merged into the divine matrix at this time as he surveyed the grounds below. Suddenly, the divine light erupted from where he was, and those annihilating divine light fell to strike Yu Sheng where he was. In an instant, Yu Sheng seemed to be submerged completely in that destructive light. Only the demonic blade remained, slashing high into the sky, colliding with the light. A terrifying, destructive storm swept into the surrounding space now. The demon god that was transformed by Yu Sheng let out a low growl as his blade continued its upward motion. It split those rays of divine light. However, the devastating demonic blade began to crack, then began to break off inch by inch. Though the blade was broken, the blade will was still intact. That figure of the demon god, perched high above the firmament, was extremely domineering. The sword slashed all the way high above the sky, approaching the divine matrix. At this moment, Pei Sheng and Jiang Qingfeng also looked down where Yu Sheng was. They were already under the spell of the divine requiem, and their will had been greatly destabilized. Coupled with their efforts to urge all their power to pour into the divine matrix, they had no more strength to spare to carry out an additional attack on Yu Sheng. But even so, there was still a powerful will that erupted from both of them in a last-ditch effort to stop Yu Sheng from continuing his way up. But at this moment, a figure appeared high above the sky next to Yu Sheng. It was as if it had emerged out of thin air. This figure was extraordinarily striking with unparalleled beauty. It was Hua Jiu. At this moment, Hua Jiu's beauty was ravishing. Her black hair flew in the wind. Her gaze swept towards Pei Xing and Jiang Qingfeng as a tremendous telekinetic power rushed into their minds. Simultaneously, a frightening force covered this entire area until the space seemed to be in a state of tranquility. What's happening? Many looked up, then down at the figure who was playing the divine guqin. Yonder, Huaji was still there. It seemed that an avatar of her had appeared above the sky. Somehow, that avatar seemed more like Huaji rather than just a phantom of her. Her soul is out of her body, some cultivator whispered. Hua Jiu had managed to appear above the sky, leveraging the out-of-body technique in order to lend Yu Sheng a hand. Boom! Yu Sheng's blade continued to move upward. The divine light that blasted down was shattered, but Yu Sheng's blade became shorter as well. Finally, it was completely broken. The blade was entirely exhausted, wiped out bit by bit. Above the divine matrix, Wang Mian's face was icy cold, and murderous intent flashed through his eyes. However, at this precise moment, a light appeared in the area below Yu Sheng. It was a boundless and brilliant divine light. A figure passed by him and appeared right beneath the divine matrix. The figure that appeared was the divine body of Xinjia, the great emperor. The moment he appeared, Hua Jiu disappeared as her spiritual soul returned to her body. In an instant, she returned below to continue playing the divine guqin. It was as if none of this had ever happened. The strike from Yu Sheng was not a real attempt to break through the divine matrix. He was merely clearing the way for Yi Futian. He had cleft a path that brought them closer to the heart of the divine matrix, so that Yi Futian could reach there without expending much effort. He could then reserve all his strength on the divine matrix itself. Buzz. After the blade was broken, divine light sprinkled upon Yu Sheng, but was blocked by the demon male. Nevertheless, he was slammed into the ground below. The body of Xinjia, the great emperor, now replaced him in his position. An unparalleled divine aurora burst out from his body. The flesh and blood body of Xinjia, the great emperor, then turned into a sword and continued forward. This body itself was an imperial weapon, the actual physical body of a great emperor. Surrounded by countless runes, the whole world now turned into a sword, striking at the heart of the divine matrix. Yu Sheng and Hua Jiu had cleared the way for him. It broke through a few rays of light. The divine body rushed into the divine matrix, colliding with it. It was exactly at the position where Wang Mian was. Underneath, all the cultivators from the divine prefecture stared at the scene playing out in the void. Their hearts throbbed. They were beyond shocked. Did he mean to rush into the divine matrix with the body of Xinjia, the great emperor? What a terrible clash it was! At this moment, a muffled sound came from the sky. Radiating from the site of the collision, a most devastating storm rampaged between heaven and earth. Even Jiang Qingfeng and Pei Xing were knocked backward. At the core of the collision, an astonishing force had exploded. At this moment, everyone inside the heavenly mandate city saw a divine light sweep toward the surrounding heaven and earth. The entire sky above the heavenly mandate city lit up. A terrible rumbling sound was heard, and that divine matrix above the firmament was collapsing, shattering and breaking apart continuously. Soon, the divine matrix that shrouded that corner of the sky disintegrated. Light penetrated through heaven and earth in that central area, and another ray of light blasted higher into the sky. Boom! Another loud boom, and the divine matrix crumbled. The air of destruction raged as countless people focused on the sky above. The body of the Xinjia, the great emperor, stood there, and it was precisely this divine body that had forced its way into the divine matrix. Wang Mian, at this moment, appeared above the firmament. He was still holding the golden divine spear, but let out a muffled groan as blood seeped from the corners of his mouth. His face was as white as a sheet. His body was trembling ever so slightly. Clearly, he was grievously injured. "It's broken," everyone secretly exclaimed. Incredible shock took hold of their hearts. The heaven-tempering divine method had been broken. The body of Xinjia, the great emperor, was like an immortal entity and had directly penetrated the divine matrix and broke it down by brute force. In this battle, many of the top figures from the ancient god clan had joined hands, but they failed to take down Yi Futian's team of 3 and had been defeated soundly. Presently, even though Pei Xing and Jiang Qingfeng were still operational with the ability to continue fighting, it was almost impossible for them to defeat Yi Futian's team of 3. It was obvious from the development so far that none of them had the ability to defeat Yi Futian on their own. Neither of them could overpower Yi Futian, who had resorted to the divine body of Xinjia, the great emperor, to augment his combat effectiveness. They weren't even in the position to defeat Yu Shang or Huajiu. Above the void, the body of Xinjia, the great emperor, was still there, looking at Wang Mian, who was high in the sky. The two of them stood there like 2 statues. Neither moved. In fact, Yi Futian himself was also under great pressure. After all, this was the body of a deity, not of his own. Wang Mian stared at the divine body below. The flesh of Xinjia, the great emperor, deserved its reputation. After all, it had successfully penetrated the divine matrix and dismantled it. Beneath him, a terrifying aura headed high into the sky, which was frowned upon by many. The cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy, as well as Yi Futian and his companion above the sky, had a slightly disturbed look in their eyes. Obviously, they felt those tyrannical auras that came from below. Although the confrontation in the void had ended, Yi Futian and his companions successfully blocked the united efforts from several top figures in the divine prefecture. However, their opponents seemed to have no intention of stopping. This battle was not over yet.